Hey guys, tonight, we're going to slip quietly into the narrow, shadowed world of a medieval brothel where creaking stairs and whispered transactions form the rhythm of your day. You'll wake in a bed so small you can barely stretch in a room so low you could touch the rafters without even standing up. And yes, spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this century without at least one bout of plague, a few questionable bruises, and the occasional visit from the city guard. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your eyes crack open to the grainy half-light seeping through a warped wooden shutter. The air is cool, but not fresh. It's been filtered through the mingled smells of damp wool smoke from last night's hearth, and a faint undercurrent of cheap ale clinging to everything. You lie curled in the cramped upper loft, the ceiling close enough to make you duck instinctively. The straw mattress beneath you is uneven, some parts soft with crushed chaff, others lumpy and poking through the thin linen sheet. Your knees press to your chest. The blanket is barely wide enough to cover you, but at least it's yours, unlike the girls who share. Your elbows are stiff from keeping them tucked in all night, the result of sleeping shoulder to shoulder in a space built more for storing sacks of barley than for human bodies. Somewhere below, you hear the faint scrape of a broom on the floorboards. A faint cough rattles through the room next door. Someone's fighting off the same spring chill that's been passing around for weeks. Historians still argue whether medieval brothels provided better living conditions than the poorest homes. But right now, your body says it's all the same. You're cold, cramped, and awake before you'd like to be. Above your head, a beam runs diagonally, its surface dark with soot and candle smoke from years gone by. A spider has woven an impressive web there, glistening faintly in the thin shaft of light. You consider brushing it down, but honestly, it's probably catching the flies before they land on your face at night. So you let the spider keep her post. You inhale, and the smell of ale-soaked wood is stronger now, mingling with the faint tang of tallow from a candle stub on the stool beside you. That stool with its one short leg is also your nightstand, your dressing table, and sometimes when the roof leaks, your step up to shift the bucket that catches the drips. From somewhere below, a floorboard groans. The madam is up early. You can tell by the way her steps have a certain clipped rhythm, each one landing with authority. She'll be making her way toward the kitchen soon, her nose catching every scent, her eyes missing nothing. You stretch just enough to feel the pull in your calves, then draw your knees back up to preserve the little pocket of warmth you've managed overnight. Your fingers find the hem of your shift, worn thin and soft from endless washings. It's not much undyed linen mended twice on the side seam, but it's yours. The richer houses in the city boast silk sheets and cushions stuffed with goose down. But here in this part of town, you take pride in the small personal things. A comb, a kerchief, that one pewter pin you traded for a favor months ago. And then there's the sound that truly signals the start of your day, the distant clang of the city gate being unlocked. The guards are letting in the first traders and carts, their iron keys rattling against the locks. Soon the streets will stir, and the day's business, yours included, will begin. You push yourself up slowly, careful not to bump your head on the low beam. A shaft of sunlight sneaks through the shutter's cracked join, catching the fine dust motes in the air. Outside, a pigeon coos, as if reminding you that you've survived another night. You plant your bare feet on the cold boards, wincing at the chill, and draw in a breath deep enough to wake the rest of you. It's not glamour, it's not comfort, but it's a life. And right now, in the cramped upper loft, with the city just beginning to stretch and stir, you're exactly where you need to be. The bucket waits for you in the corner, brimming with water drawn from the courtyard, well sometime before dawn. You dip your fingers in first, and the cold is immediate, like someone's tipped a handful of pebbles straight down your spine. There's no easing into it. You just grip the wooden handle of the ladle brace yourself and pour. The shock makes you gasp out loud, which in turn makes the girl in the next loft mutter something about cursed morning people. A rivulet runs down your neck, carrying away the salt and sweat of a night's rest. The wash is brisk, not indulgent, face, neck, armpits, the crook of your elbows, then calves and feet. You learned long ago not to let the cold linger. It stiffens muscles faster than it cleans skin. Medieval hygiene gets a bad rap, but here's a mainstream fact: people did wash, especially in work like yours. The smell of an unwashed body could ruin business faster than a bad reputation. Rosemary sprigs are scattered in the water, a trick the madam swears hides anything unpleasant. It's not perfect, more herbal beer than Mountain Meadow, but it's better than nothing. Historians still argue whether perfumed waters like this were a luxury or a necessity for the lower working classes. Standing here, you know the answer is both. You don't have much coin, but you can't afford to reek. The madam's fines for smelling like a cart horse are steep, and she's not bluffing. You wring the end of your shift, watching water drip onto the warped boards. Your toes curl reflexively, avoiding the cold puddles. Somewhere downstairs, a shutter slams. The first cart of the morning must have rumbled past. The smell of baking bread drifts in from the street. Someone's already ahead of you in the day. And because this is a brothel, there's always a little fringe absurdity. The madam insists that one of the girls, Greta, washes in wine on the first Sunday of every month. She claims it keeps her skin supple enough to charge double. You've never tried it, waste of wine if you ask you. But Greta swears by it, and she's not exactly short on customers. You run your damp fingers through your hair, feeling for tangles. No comb today. The last one vanished mysteriously from the shared shelf. Likely borrowed, likely forgotten. You do the best you can with your fingers, smoothing strands behind your ears. The little pewter pin sits where you left it last night, gleaming faintly in the half-light. You stab it into place, anchoring the hair away from your eyes. A breeze sneaks through the shutter, carrying the faint scent of smoke from someone's hearth. You shiver, partly from the cold, partly from that little edge of the day beginning in earnest. There's no lingering after the bucket wash. Customers don't wait for girls to wake up fully. You give your face one last splash for luck and stand the floorboards creaking under your weight. Your knees still ache from yesterday's stairs, but they'll loosen as the day moves on. Down below, you hear the madam's voice, sharp, quick, and impatient. She's calling someone to fetch more water. That's the thing about this life, the chores never stop, even if you do. And so, shaking the last drops from your hands, you turn toward the ladder that will carry you down into the brothel's waking day. You descend the ladder, palms skimming splinters you could identify by touch at this point, and land on the main room boards just as the madam's footsteps fall into that unmistakable staccato, inspect, inhale, decide. She doesn't so much walk as carve a path through air that still smells of last night's ale and rosemary rinse. You pull your shoulders back, half habit, half shield, and wait your turn in the little parade that forms at dawn. She starts with shoes, always shoes. If a man sees a clean shoe, he imagines a clean life, she likes to say, which is hilarious given the mud crusted on half the city. You lift your foot, and her gaze flicks over the leather as if it confessed something. The sole passes muster. The laces earn a tight nod. Your coin pouch gets a brisk pat. She's not stealing, just assessing weight like a human scale with opinions. You feel the clink in your belly more than in the fabric. Coins are light when they're yours, and heavy when she's thinking about them. Her eyebrow travels, you know, the sharp little scythe that reaps excuses and lands on your hair. You smoothed it after the bucket wash, but the loft breeze had its own creative vision. Pin, she says. You touch it. Seen you answer because words are currency and you spend only what's necessary before breakfast. She leans in, inhales. Rosemary tallow, a hint of sleep. Better, she murmurs like a priest absolving you for forgetting a genuflection. To your left, Greta steps forward, smelling faintly of wine bath Sunday. The madam approves, as if she isn't the one who invented the ritual. Greta flashes a smile that has bought more stew than your entire purse. And to be fair, you'd probably pay extra to smell like a vineyard and not a stable too. Light joke one drifts through your head. If you doused yourself in wine every week, you'd be broke fragrant and very popular with wasps. A chalk slate hangs by the door, yesterday's tallies ghosting the surface in pale streaks. The madam scrapes a line through a name someone's on laundry duty all week and taps the edge with her thumbnail. There's an economy to these mornings. Dress hems are lifted not in invitation, but for damage inspection. Fingers trace seam strength, thumbs press at mended places. If your life were a book, this is the dog-eared page where the reader checks how much is left. Mainstream fact time slipped in like a pin under a cap. Many European towns licensed brothels collecting taxes and posting rules about where you could work, what days you must close, and what clothing you couldn't wear to avoid confusing respectable women. Your house is legal on paper, if not in every neighbor's opinion. There's a wax-sealed permit in the madam's chest, updated each year after someone in an office sighs, takes a fee and pretends not to notice the line of men waiting outside this door by sundown. You step forward another pace in the queue. The front room's window shutter stands ajar, drawing in a ribbon of street noise, cartwheels, a dog scolding a rooster, a boy whistling the same 3 notes forever. The madam turns her attention to hands. Palms up, wrists out. She studies your nails like a jeweler eyes a flawed pearl. Soap, she asks. Yes. From whose dish you hesitate. The wrong answer earns a lecture about vanishing supplies. The right answer earns a reminder to replace what you used. Kitchen, you say. She squints and lets it pass. Behind her, the house ledger rests open on the trestle table, columns for names, marks for tasks, a neat inventory of candles, oil, and bread. There's a smear of stew that will be there forever. Every book in this place eventually becomes a cookbook. The madam makes a note with a feather-cut quill, lips pursed. You always wonder if she's totting up coins or counting heartbeats. When she looks at you, she sees both. Turn, she says, and you pivot, giving her the full view of your linen shift. The side seam you mended last week holds. Your hem will need attention soon. Floorboards eat cloth like mice. You're not ashamed of stitches. Each one says you chose repair over waste. But you do feel that flash of defensive pride when her fingers find the patch you set at midnight, the one you swore would pass for new in this light. She nods again. You exhale. Quirky tidbit floats in because your mind never lets go of trivia. In some towns, workers like you were required to wear striped hoods or distinctive sleeves on certain market days, supposedly so honest wives wouldn't be mistaken for you. Here the rule is looser, a colored ribbon on feast days, and the madam keeps a bundle of them in a jar like a bouquet of ironic flowers. You've worn worse uniforms. At least ribbons don't itch like straw-stuffed collars. Teeth, she says. Everyone bears a smile like a lineup of shutters, some bright, some crooked, some permanently closed. You show yours unremarkable but intact. She checks for cracked lips, too, the way winter sneaks in at the edges. Drink water, she orders in that tone that brooks no argument. As if you could forget. The bucket, and you are already on a first-name basis. Coin she finishes, and you hand over last night's do-house cut, first your portion knotted tight. Your pouch feels suddenly very philosophical, like a monk who just discovered materialism. You're not broke, but your wealth is shy about making eye contact. Light joke 2. Your money has a curfew and respects it more than you ever did. Health, she asks, quieter. This is the part that isn't for show. There's no doctor on staff, just experience, vinegar, and rumor. She studies your eyes for fever, your throat for swelling, the faint shadows beneath your cheeks that say sleep wasn't kind. She doesn't touch unless she has to, a boundary you respect more than most laws in this city. Historians still argue whether brothel keepers acted as informal health inspectors or simply protected profits. You suspect the answer is selfish and practical at once. Keep girls well enough to work, and everyone breathes easier. You nod that you're fine. Mostly. Knees ache from the stairs, a cough tickles from the loft dust, and a bruise on your shin narrates last night's argument with a stool. Nothing you can't outwalk. The madam tilts her head, measuring that mostly, and then raps her knuckles on the table in conclusion. Eat, she says. Then rooms. Her sentences never waste time putting on shoes. Inspection drifts along the line. The youngest girl fidgets, caught between trying to look older and trying not to be noticed at all. The madam pauses with her softer for a heartbeat, adjusting a neckline, retwining a braid. It's the kind of tenderness that never makes it into the ledger, but keeps the roof quiet at night. You file that moment under things you don't expect and are grateful for. Sunlight creeps a finger across the wall, finds the polished spot on the mantel where someone idly rubs the plaster when they're nervous. The hearth is cold ash now. It'll roar later when stew time arrives. Your stomach reminds you that stale bread is a time traveler. It left yesterday, but still hasn't quite arrived in the present. Breakfast will fix that. The madam closes the ledger with a thump that sounds like a gate dropping. Rules she recites as if you've all forgotten overnight. No customers taken past the third bell without approval. No credit to men who promise a purse tomorrow. No singing from the balcony unless it's market day and you've actually got the notes. No fighting with the dice men next door. They always win even when they lose. And absolutely no borrowing combs without returning them. Her eyes brush past you at that, and you decide the communal comb mystery is now officially a cold case. Mainstream fact's cousin taps the window, city curfew will fall at night, and the watch expects lamps doused and doors barred, except for permitted houses like this one that run late with supervised activity. The law pretends to sleep while the city practices. You've heard the madam talk her way through a door inspection twice brighter than any torch that tongue, and you learned not to interrupt genius at work. Questions she asks, which is rhetorical, the way thunder is polite. Still, you lift a hand because sometimes you enjoy feeling brave before breakfast. The ribbon color for St. Crispin's feast, you ask. Blue, she says, so they don't confuse you with shoemakers. Again. You nod gravely, as if this confusion is a weekly crisis, and not a very specific incident involving a patron who believed 2 ribbons meant half price. Light joke 3. You're fluent in ribbon economics, now basic supply, unending demand, and occasional strangulation risk. She waves the line away, and the room exhales. Chairs scrape, feet shuffle, someone laughs too loudly, and then pinches her own arm to settle down. You stand there a second longer, letting the inspection linger like a finishing bell. There's comfort in routine even when it pinches. Someone who sees you every morning and says without saying, still here, still standing still, part of the count. On the mantel, a tiny clay charm sits tucked behind a cracked tile, an eye, a hand, and a swirl pressed with a thumb. The older girls swear it keeps envy out and coins in. You don't believe it exactly, but you still touch it on difficult days because belief is often just a softer word for habit. Historians would probably file it under folk magic of the urban poor and debate whether charms like this arose from pagan remnants or practical psychology. Historians still argue whether these trinkets mattered or merely distracted. You're content to let the charm sit and mind its quiet business while you mind yours. The madam glides to the door, checks the street, like a general reading a battlefield. She adjusts the angle of the bench, the tilt of the window shutter, the way a curtain falls to make the room look both welcoming and safe. Stagecraft, you think. Even the broom leaning in the corner is part of the scene. We are humble, we are clean. Please leave your judgment with your muddy shoes. You roll your shoulders, feel the loom of the day warp itself into place. Eat, she says again, softer now, already turning away. You nod, because that's the easiest command to obey. And as you head toward the table, bread a crock of soft cheese, trying its best onions, sliced so thin, they're practically ideas. You feel lighter than you did on the ladder, inspected, but not diminished. The morning has measured you and found you roughly adequate, which is victory enough before noon. The rosemary on your skin is fading into something like confidence. Your coin pouch swings light, yes, but swinging, and the scythe eyebrow is sheathed for at least an hour. You take your seat, tear a heel of bread, and let the first bite pull you fully into the day. Somewhere a bell rings the second hour. You don't flinch. Routine has you, and for now that's a kind hand on your back. The bread is dry enough to make your jaw work for it. But that's part of the charm, it keeps you chewing long enough to hear all the morning whispers. You lean an elbow on the trestle table, the wood polished smooth by elbows that came before yours, and listen as the room begins its daily chorus. Greta's telling the new girl, in a tone pitched just shy of scandal, about the mayor's youngest son being caught behind the tanner's shed with someone who was very much not his betrothed. The story's on its third retelling this morning, and it's already acquired new details: a gold clasp lost in the mud, a shoe left behind, like some fairy tale with worse morals. Historians still argue whether medieval gossip carried truth faster than the written word. Sitting here, you'd put your money on the former. A jug of small beer makes the rounds, and you pour yourself half a cup. It's weak, almost watery, but safer than the well on most days. A slice of onion stings your tongue and wakes your eyes up in the best way. You think of the cooks in richer households, sipping spiced wine for breakfast, and light joke one pops in your mind. They may have silk sheets, but they'll never know the thrill of starting the day with an onion that could strip paint. From the corner, two older girls are debating whether the knight who rode past last night was actually a knight, or just someone with enough coin to rent the armor. That's the kind of conversation that could last a week here, half fact, half wishful thinking. You remember seeing the man's plume bright against the twilight, and how the madam gave him a nod that was equal parts welcome and calculation. Mainstream fact drifts in like the scent of baking from next-door medieval towns, often had sumptuary laws restricting clothing by class. If your knight was a pretender, he'd risk a fine or worse for wearing silk and silver without the rank to match. Not that fines stop people from playing dress-up when it suits them half the dice den. Regulars dress like merchants on market day just to get better ale. The back door bangs open, and one of the serving girls slips in with a basket of rolls swiped legally or not from the baker's unsold pile. She smells like flour and wood smoke, and you find yourself leaning in for a deeper breath before catching it. That scent could almost erase the sharper tang of the brothel's walls after a damp night. Almost. Someone mentions the old man who runs the candle stall has been buying goose fat in bulk. That means one of two things: he's got a big order for feast day tapers, or he's found a cheaper way to stretch the tallow that won't smell right when lit. You make a mental note to avoid his stock. If the second rumor proves true, bad candles can turn a good evening into a coughing fit. Across the table, Greta peels her bread apart in layers, as if rationing the pleasure, and leans in to share another tidbit. A merchant's ship ran aground on the riverbank 2 nights ago, spilling barrels of imported oranges into the mud. Half were stolen before dawn. The youngest girl asks what an orange tastes like, and the room falls into competing descriptions: sweet like honey, sour like vinegar, sweet sour like cider left too long. You've had one once years ago, and the memory is still bright enough to make your mouth water. Quirky tidbit slips in with the taste in some medieval ports brothels doubled as unofficial news centers, because sailors would trade stories as easily as coin. Ships came with more than cargo. They carried rumors, recipes, and sometimes diseases nobody here had names for yet. A burst of laughter at the far end makes you glance up. The new girl's been told the city guard captain keeps a pet ferret under his helmet, and she's gullible enough to believe it. You let the joke stand. There's comfort in harmless nonsense before the serious business begins. Light joke 2 crosses your thoughts. If the captain really did keep a ferret under his helmet, it would probably do a better job of policing the streets than he does. The table conversation drifts to wagers on how many arrests will be made at tonight's market. You half listen, your eyes on the window. The street outside is starting to hum boot heels on cobbles, the creak of cart axles, a hawker's cry about fresh fish that's anything but. A stray dog noses along the gutter tail, high the undisputed mayor of his own small kingdom. The madam passes behind you, her presence marked by the sudden hush that follows her like a shadow. She doesn't sit. She never does. Instead, she pours herself a cup of beer, sips, and says, "Enough loafing. Rooms won't sweep themselves." It's not a scold, just the verbal nudge that keeps the house on time. You stand brushing crumbs from your lap. Breakfast is over, but the flavor of the morning onion bread gossip lingers as you head toward the front room. The day outside is ready for you, and the brothel, in its own way, is ready for the day. The broom leans in its usual spot by the front door, bristles splayed like the skirt of a woman who's seen too many dances. You take it up, feeling the familiar weight in your hands. The front room still wears the debris of last night: scattered straw, a few chicken feathers from someone's cloak, and a sticky spot on the floor that you don't care to investigate too closely. You start in long, steady strokes, pushing the straw and dust toward the open door. The morning air slips in cooler here by the street, with a faint promise of rain, and with it comes the smells of horse dung, baking bread, and that indefinable city scent that is equal parts market spice smoke and human ambition. Sweeping is not glamorous, but it is strategic. Every pass of the broom is a silent announcement. To passers-by, we keep our house in order. Mainstream fact for you: many medieval brothels, especially the licensed ones, took pride in appearing cleaner and better kept than the average tavern, partly to keep the city inspectors happy, partly to lure in customers who didn't want to feel like they were catching something before they even walked in. On the low trestle table by the wall sits a chipped jug of water with a few sprigs of rosemary bobbing inside. You dip your fingers, flick the fragrant drops across the swept boards. It's an old trick, the madam swears, by scenting the air just enough to mask the stale beer and candle smoke. Historians still argue whether herbs like rosemary and lavender were valued more for their fragrance or their supposed ability to ward off sickness. You'd say both, though you doubt a sprig of rosemary ever stopped a cough in this house. The chairs get nudged back into place, angled just so. A faded tapestry hangs by the hearth, originally a hunting scene, now so worn you could pretend the deer are small horses or large dogs, depending on the light. You tug it straight anyway. Greta appears with a bucket of wood shavings to scatter over the damp spots on the floor. This is one of those quirky details about medieval cleaning you never thought you'd learn. Wood shavings not only soak up spills, they give a faint, clean scent when walked on. Plus, they keep the floor from becoming an ice rink when the weather's wet. Light joke one drifts in, who needs fancy rugs when you can have the floor smell like a carpenter's workshop? Out on the street, a pair of boys loiter near the doorway, peering in with the wide eyes of those who are curious, but too young to be welcome. You give them the kind of look that sends them scattering down the alley. There are enough real customers without entertaining would-be pranksters. From the corner, the madam's voice floats in candles, 2 fresh ones for the front. You fetch them from the cupboard, their tallow surfaces smooth and faintly greasy. The candle ends from last night will be melted down later. Nothing is wasted here unless it walks out in a patron's pocket. You place the fresh ones in their iron holders and light them, the little flames trembling in the draft. The broom pauses mid-sweep as you glance up at the front window. The glass is bubbled and imperfect, imported from the coast years ago, and it catches the light in a way that makes the room look warmer than it really is. That's important. Warmth sells. Quirky tidbit slides in from memory. Some brothels in port towns would hang garlands or colored cloth in the windows to signal the presence of new girls or special services, much like coded shop signs. Here the signal is simpler. The window open by a hand's width. The curtain drawn halfway enough for someone walking past to catch the scent of rosemary and the glow of lamplight. You finish sweeping the last stubborn feather out the door and shake the broom briskly on the step. The street is livelier now, hawkers shouting prices, a cartwheel clattering into a rut, the rhythmic thud of a cooper working somewhere nearby. You take it all in without moving, letting the city's hum set the pace for your own day. Behind you, the floorboards creak as another girl crosses the room carrying a tray of pewter cups. Soon, the front room will be ready for the first customer, and the madam will have that small, satisfied smile she gets when everything is in its place. You prop the broom back by the door hands, faintly scented with rosemary and dust, and give the room one last glance. Clean enough to pass inspection, warm enough to welcome, real enough to feel lived in. You step back toward the hallway, where the murmur of voices says, breakfast gossip has already shifted to bets on who will be the first through the door today. You don't have to wait long. The scrape of boots on the step is followed by the dull thump of a hand against the doorframe, a traveler's greeting without words. You glance up from straightening the candle wick and see him fill the doorway, a man in a weather-stained cloak, shoulders broad enough to block most of the light behind him. His beard is streaked with dust, his boots splattered with the clay-colored mud from the western road. The madam's smile appears like a conjuring trick. She's there before you can say anything, her voice smooth enough to sell bread to the baker. Welcome, traveler. You look like you've walked half the kingdom before breakfast. He chuckles, the sound low and rough, and pats the coin pouch at his belt, a movement so casual it's almost boastful. Mainstream fact slips into your mind, like a whisper. Merchants on the road were some of the steadiest customers for licensed brothels in medieval towns, partly because city lodging was expensive and partly because a warm room with company was more memorable than any tavern bed. The madam glances at you, the signal clear. You step forward, offering a seat at one of the trestle tables, while she murmurs something about fresh water and a light bite. He waves away the food, but accepts the drink, gulping the ale as if his throat were a dry well. There's a moment where you size each other up. His eyes are the pale gray of someone who's seen long roads and longer negotiations. You catch the faint jingle of coins as he shifts more than enough for your time, and perhaps enough to keep the madam happy for the rest of the morning. Historians still argue whether the prices in licensed houses were fixed by city ordinance or simply suggested by the guilds. Here the madam has a rate sheet in her head, adjustable by mood, weather, and how much she thinks someone's willing to part with. He leans in, slightly lowering his voice, as if he's about to tell you the location of buried treasure. Quiet room upstairs. It's phrased like a question, but it's really a statement with coins attached. You nod, offering the faintest smile, the kind that says yes without making it sound too eager. Light joke. One crosses your mind: upstairs in this house is hardly quiet when the dice den next door is in full swing, but the man will find that out soon enough. The madam passes behind you, placing a key into your palm. Her eyes flick toward the stairs in that same clipped command she uses for everything from wash that floor to escort this guest. You guide him toward the narrow staircase, each step groaning under the weight of his boots. Quirky tidbit rises as you climb. Some brothels were designed with winding stairs, not for decoration, but so a pursuer, an angry husband, a jealous rival couldn't see straight into the rooms from the entrance. Here, the stairs turn sharply halfway up, giving you both a moment to breathe before the hall. At the landing, the smell of beeswax from a freshly polished door meets you. You unlock it, letting him step inside first. The candle on the small table flares when you light it, shadows dancing across the uneven plaster walls. From below, the muted thump of the front door closing says the city has already swallowed the next set of footsteps. But for now, in this room, the day belongs to you, the merchant, and the slow ticking of the oil lamp. The coins will come later. The work is now. The staircase announces every step like a town crier, long groans, short squeaks, one plank that always makes a noise like a mouse with opinions. You lead the merchant up with the key warm in your palm, candle stub in the other hand. Wax beads along your thumb, cooling fast, little pearls. You'll end up scraping off your skin later like secret jewelry. The turn in the stairs hides you from the front room. The angle is deliberate, a stitched fold in the house's skirt, so curious eyes can't see too far. At the landing, you pause to listen. The house has its own pulse, the soft clink of cups below a broom being set down, the faraway rattle from the dice den next door. You touch the lintel with 2 fingers, habit not prayer, and fit the key into the trembling oval of the lock. The door gives as if remembering you, and you guide him inside. The upstairs boards complain again as you cross to the table. 1 candle becomes 2, then 3, their flames catching, leaning, deciding which way the draft blows. Tallow softens quickly, and the room answers with that faint barnyard note you've learned to ignore. Beeswax would smell sweeter, but that's church money, not house money. Mainstream fact slides into place in much of medieval Europe: tallow candles lit homes and inns, while beeswax was reserved for churches, and the rich cleaner burning pricier and a glow that seemed to make even dust look devout. You take stock. The bed's linen is freshly drawn, puckered in the middle where the rope support sags a little. The madam had the ropes tightened last month, but ropes stretch the way time does in this room, patiently with a plan. A chipped basin waits on the washstand, along with a folded cloth that wishes it were newer. On the sill, the bubbled pane holds a small square of daylight, like a coin trapped in glass. The draft runs its fingers along your sleeve and tugs the candle flame sideways. You move one to the mantel and another to the table, a choreography you could do in the dark. You set the little rules down without saying them. You place the key on the inner side of the door, bows out, and set your shoe casually beside the jamb. If anyone tries the handle, the shoe will tip and thump, a modest alarm. The merchant notices your small ritual eyes creasing with a flicker of respect. He's been on roads where locks were suggestions and walls were gossip. Light joke one passes through your mind: around here, a good shoe makes a better guard than half the watch. The man shrugs off his cloak. Dust blooms rolling through the candlelight like a private weather. He's older than he seemed in the doorway. Roads steal years and then spend them back on your face. You offer the basin, He dips his hands, splashes his cheeks, gasps softly. Cold, he says, as if water might have been surprised to find itself that way. You hand him the cloth, and he rubs at the dust, like someone negotiating with a stain. You keep your voice low the way you'd speak beside a sleeping child or a skittish horse. Long road, he nods. One, I've promised myself not to walk again, he says, which means he'll walk it again next season because coin and contracts are louder than promises whispered to yourself in a rented room. You fetch the small jug of ale from the corner. He takes it, gratefully sips, and then glances at your face as if waiting for a price to float up between you like a speech bubble. It doesn't. The madam does numbers. You do temperature. You gauge a man by how he holds a cup where his eyes rest, whether he says please even when he doesn't have to. He says please. Your shoulders let go of a fraction you didn't know they were holding. Quirky tidbit pads into your thoughts. Some houses keep a bowl of sliced apples and a bowl of cloves near the hearth, not for eating together, but to pin the cloves into the apple skin and let the pomander dry into a perfumed stone you can roll in your palm. You have one in your pocket now, small as an egg, black as night, smelling faintly of winter markets. You turn it once while he drinks a silent little anchor. Quiet, he repeats as if practicing the sound, and then he sits on the edge of the bed, watching the candle as if it's explaining something. Outside, a cart rattles past. The wheel hits a hole in the street you could name because every cart finds it every night. You allow yourself a breath long enough to feel your ribs move. Work is a series of decisions made gently and quickly. Where to stand, where to place the light, where to set a boundary that looks like courtesy. Historians still argue whether houses like this used agreed-upon signals to communicate limits, lace tied to a bedpost. A cup turned upside down, a scarf laid across a chair. Your house has its own quiet language. You keep the cup upright, you place your kerchief folded neatly on the table, you angle the chair against the door at a precise tilt. He notices, he adjusts. The conversation you'll never have is already finished. He offers a coin preemptively, almost shyly. You don't touch it yet. There will be time for coin. Instead, you dampen the cloth again, and with permission in your eyes, wipe the road dust from his knuckles. The gesture is practical, but it feels like turning the page of a book that's been stuck on the same sentence. His shoulders lower. The room's creaks adjust to a softer key. The lamp ticks. Wax drops. The candlelight paints his beard in copper and shadow. Your own shadow moves across the plaster, a friend who doesn't interrupt. In the corner, the floorboard that always lifts half a finger's width decides it will behave tonight. You nudge it with your toe anyway, just to remind it who's in charge. Light joke too in this house. The floorboards are employees. You supervise, they complain, everyone keeps their job. You speak little. Morning has already spent its words. The afternoon will need its share. Silence is its own service here, valuable, rare, hard to manage, without making it heavy. You keep it light like a curtain you can see through. He tries a story about a bridge washed out by spring floods. You make a small, sympathetic sound. He mentions a customs officer who counts with both hands and then asks for a third, and you let your smile show in the candle rim without letting it take over your face. You make sure the candle near the window sits firm. Wax on the sill is a housekeeping complaint waiting to happen. You fish a sliver of old tallow from the dish and wedge it under the holder's foot to balance it. In another life, you might have been a carpenter. In this one, you're a carpenter of minutes, planing rough edges from the day, until even a weary man can run his hand along it and not catch a splinter. Another mainstream detail skims the surface in many towns. Licensed houses paid not just taxes but peace money To local officials, a soft-edged bribe that ensured the watch would answer a knock when needed and look the other way when not. You've seen the envelope change hands, brown paper sealed not the madam's finest handwriting, but neat enough for the city's bookkeeper to pretend the world is orderly. Down the hall, a door latches. The wood carries sound like gossip. Everything is a little louder than privacy would like, and a little softer than scandal requires. You and the merchant exist in a bubble that knows it's a bubble and enjoys the illusion anyway. He sets the cup down carefully, a man grateful for places where gravity behaves. You move through the routine not as a rote, but as a path through a familiar wood. You know where the branch hangs low. You know where the root tries to trip you. A thread on the bed linen catches at your knuckle. You tuck it under rather than snap it. A hair has escaped your pin and insists on tickling your forehead. You twist it back with the same patience you'd use on a stubborn knot. Light joke 3 wanders by. If patience were coined, you'd be the one with the heavy pouch, and the madam would finally nod like she does at Greta on wine Sundays. You don't say it. You keep the humor tucked under your tongue where it warms slowly and keeps you company. The candle near the mantel sighs as a breeze nudges it. You shade the flame with your palm until it settles. Your fingers glow orange. Your palm smells like warm fat and rosemary from the morning's water, domestic alchemy at its finest. The merchant watches your hand like he's trying to remember something. Maybe a kitchen at home, a wife who can make a stew taste like steadiness, a son who would rather learn dice than letters. Historians still argue whether men sought houses like this primarily for touch talk or the illusion of being understood for an hour. You don't weigh the motives. You weigh the room light air, how loud the street is getting, whether the dice den is heading toward a raucous afternoon. It is. It always is. You angle the chair a fraction more, and the chair thanks you by not squealing. When at last the coin is set where it should be, and the room's temperature has been coaxed toward calm, you take a small moment to look at the candle again. The way wax builds a lip threatens overflow, then changes its mind. There's a sermon in that if anyone asked for sermons here. They don't. They ask for time that feels round and finished. You can offer that sometimes. Below, a bell strikes once, twice, not yet noon. The sound slides up the stairwell and rests. You breathe with it, matching pace. The merchant nods toward the window. "Rain," he asks. Soon, you say. And sure enough, the air tastes wetter, like a promise and a warning. You set the cloth to soak in the basin, squeeze out the water until it runs mostly clear, and fold it into a neat square. Your grandmother, if she'd had the patience to imagine your life, would approve of the corners aligning. You cap the little oil lamp with its tin lid, leaving the candles to do the talking. The upstairs creaks one last time as you cross to the door. The shoe-faithful sentinel still leans where you left it. You tip it with your toe so it bumps the wood, a gentle end-of-scene clap. The merchant's shoulders look less like hills now, and more like a road on the other side of the mountain. You pick up the key, weigh it once, metal obligation breakfast rent, and then slip it into your palm. The candle wobbles and steadies, and the room for a heartbeat feels exactly balanced between what has happened and what will. You ease the door shut with 2 fingers, letting it catch on the last inch so it doesn't broadcast your exit to the whole street. Downstairs, the house is already adjusting to the rhythm of late morning chairs, scraping cups, clinking the madam's voice, conducting softly like a baton you can't see. You slide your shawl over your shoulders, tuck your coin pouch inside your bodice where pickpockets' hopes go to die, and step into the lane just as the clouds decide to have an opinion. A sprinkle, not yet rain, freckles the dust and lifts the smell of horse and wet leather. You turn right, always right at first, past the dice den, because left means you'll be asked to just step in for one hand, and you've learned your lesson. The man on the dice door gives you a wink anyway. The door behind him coughs up laughter, the sort that travels on ale. You navigate the gutter's little stream, hop a patchwork of stones, and enter the slice of the city that sells everything from onions to absolution, depending on the stall you choose. The market hums a knit of hawker cries, iron clink, and the papery thud of cabbages being turned like pages. Stalls crouch under patched awnings, red-dyed sailcloth here, a faded strip of monastic brown there. Sausages hang like punctuation, apples shine in straw-lined bins, fish glare with cloudy eyes that promise regret by sundown. You head for the old woman with the apples, because hers are always less bruised than the price suggests, and because she never asks questions beyond sweet or sharp, today sweet. The youngest girl likes the sweet ones, and she did your hem last week without being asked. Mainstream fact sidles up beside you. Markets in many medieval towns were regulated by the city official, weights and measures inspected, stall fees collected, even set market days enforced to keep the crowds predictable. You've watched the Beatles come by with their iron pound and their smug half-smile, swapping a vendor's fake stout weight for the honest one with theatrical size. The apple woman keeps her scale honest and her tongue sharper than her knife. The beetles drift past her like boats around a rock. She lifts a fruit and turns it in her palm. First picking from Maynard's orchard, she says, as if that name alone sweetens the bite. Her fingers are stained the color of tea from a lifetime of harvests. She offers you a taste slice on the blade's flat. It's crisp enough to make your teeth sing. You nod, show 2 fingers for number, and she nests a pair into your kerchief with a maternal fuss that makes you want to be kinder to your own knees. Quirky tidbit threads through the air like cinnamon apothecaries will sometimes prick apples with clove and sprinkle a little rosewater, selling them as breath charms. Your house prefers the clove pomanders you roll in your pocket, stronger, longer lasting, and less likely to invite wasps to flirt with your face. But there's a stall today hawking those fancified apples, and a line of sweet-breathed lads trying to decide which girl might be impressed by fruit that smells like a saint's pocket. You pay 2 small coins glinting like tamed sunlight, and the apple woman slides you an extra wedge with the air of a conspiracy. You pop it in your mouth and let the juice flood a corner of the morning you hadn't noticed was empty. Light joke 1, if apples truly kept the doctor away, apothecaries would be out bribing the beetles by Michaelmas. Fabric next. You angle through the press toward the cloth quarter, where the tailors hang pride and scraps in equal measure. Bolts of wool lean together like old men gossiping. A boy with a needle-bitten lip is holding up a sliver of blue to the light, deciding whether it's sky or merely washing day hope. You head for the remnant basket, a wicker mouth full of possibilities, ribbon lengths, sleeves worths, squares that could become patches or luxuries, depending on who's doing the dreaming. You ruffle gently, like petting a cat you don't want to startle. There, a length of off-white linen, not fine but cleaner woven than you usually get. A thumb of striped wool that could be a pocket. A ribbon in madder red, bright enough to be confidence, not so bright, you'll be called peacock by the wrong mouths. You build a little pile the color of reasonable joy. Historians still argue whether lower-class women favored bright colors whenever they could afford them, or whether the daily grime worn the palette down to practical browns and grays. In your world, color is a hedge against monotony and a flag you can lower when the watch grows nosy. You pick the madder ribbon for feast days and a quieter brown tape for the rest. The tailor with the pepper salt beard weighs your pile in his palm as if hands were scales. Offcuts, he pronounces, but loyal. You like that loyal cloth, faithful scraps. He names a price that assumes you didn't notice the frayed edge. You raise an eyebrow that assumes he did. Negotiation is a dance. You lead, he pretends to be surprised, and you both bow to the truth that coins breed faster in the market than in the purse. You shave a copper off, and he throws in a handful of thread that looks respectable, while knowing it will tangle if you glance away. Fair enough. You tuck the cloth into your shawl, the apples snugging against your ribs like little well-behaved hearts. A gust tugs the awning and new rain whispers on canvas. A fishmonger yodels something about river fresh, and you remember the river's current mood, muddy, opinionated, sometimes given to throwing its banks at the road. A man selling eels swears they're good luck cooked whole. The last time you tried eel pie, you concluded, luck has many disguises, and slimy rope is one of them. Light joke 2 slides by. If fortune favors the bold, she must be on intimate terms with eel vendors. You pause at the edge of the square, where a fiddler saws away at a tune that makes your feet consider forgiving your life for being so hard. He's missing 2 strings, and the third is bravely pretending to be a fourth. A little knot of children stomps along coins flashing into the hat like minnows. You add a sliver of copper because it buys you 10 seconds of music without obligations, and that in the middle of a day is medicine stronger than most apothecary jars. A monk in sandals wades through the crowd with a basket of parchment slips, indulgences, prayers, or possibly raffle tickets for a relic you suspect is a chicken bone with good posture. He is kind-eyed and damp, and he smiles at you as if your face were a chapel. The city does this, sometimes places pity and pragmatism side by side and tells them to share a bench. Mainstream fact cuts in politely. Monasteries and convents often ran guest houses, and sometimes infirmaries. Charity wasn't fantasy, but it also wasn't endless. You have accepted broth from a nun with hands that could sew a wound shut faster than a tailor. The world is inconsistent, which is another way of saying it's alive. On the corner near the Coopers, a stall sells lamp oil in narrow-necked flasks. Yours at the house runs low by the 3rd bell more often than you'd like. You buy 1 flask olive oil cut with something less noble, your nose says, and hope the wick won't protest. The merchant corks it with a twist and a grin that suggests he's already counting the next customer. You tuck the flask deep. Oil stains are the autobiographies of the careless. Rain freshens into a steady lace. You pull your shawl closer. A girl in a yellowed veil trips on a cobble and rights herself with a smile so quick you want to applaud. A baker's boy barrels past with a tray of rolls, leaving steam trails that smell like forgiveness. You think of the youngest girl of Greta's wine bath Sunday confidence, of the madam's ledger waiting for afternoon numbers. Time to turn back before the market's gentle chaos swallows the coin you can't spare. Historians still argue whether brothels sent girls to market as a deliberate public presence, advertising by errands, or whether you slipped out between bells simply because everyone needs thread and apples. The truth, as usual, lives in the middle. The city is a web, and you're one more strand trying not to snap. On the way home, you pass the tinker's cart, a metal forest of ladle shears and dented pots hung like clanging fruit. He's hammering a pan back to usefulness, each strike a promise that even bent things can hold heat again. You pause long enough to ask the price of patching a hole in the house kettle. He names a number that implies your kettle will be a prince afterward. You laugh. He laughs. The rain laughs louder. Light joke 3: if mended pots could brag, the kitchen would be a chorus of, "Remember when I was useless, you'll bring the kettle tomorrow," when coin feels a hair braver. You slip back into the lane that leads to your door. The dice den is in mid-argument, a man insisting the dice are cursed, which is another way of saying he's learning arithmetic the hard way. You keep your eyes front, your steps even. The brothel's sign a painted lantern with more imagination than perspective swings once, twice. The door opens before you touch it. The serving girl has a sixth sense for returning feet. Inside, the air changes warmer, rosemary-threaded familiar as your own shadow. You set the apples on the table, the cloth in your box, the oil by the madam's ledger, so she can decide whether the candles get a night off. The house glances at your hands and knows you've been kind to it. You've brought small things that turn a building into a place. The madam clocks the ribbon color without a word. The corner of her mouth lifts as if to say, "Feast day approved." She taps the ledger once, a metronome calling you back to the next movement. Outside, the market continues without you, but inside the rooms assemble themselves for the twilight rush you can already feel, arriving like a tide. You shake the last rain from your shawl, smooth the linen offcut with your palm, and let your breath fall in time with the house again. The apples shine like promises. The ribbon glows like a private decision. The oil waits slightly suspect, ready to be useful. And you, washed by rain and market noise, are ready for the hours that turn coin into rent, thread into hems, and rooms into stories no ledger will ever fully catch. By the time you've stowed the apples and cloth, the courtyard out back is breathing like an oven. Noon in this part of the city doesn't just arrive, it sits on you. The flagstones are already warm enough to bake a loaf if you left it long enough, and the air has that lazy shimmer that makes straight lines look like they're humming. You take your usual seat on the worn bench under the crooked pear tree. It leans slightly toward the wall, as though trying to hear what the neighbors are saying. The tree's leaves rattle softly, catching just enough breeze to remind you that air can still move if it wants to. You fan yourself with the edge of your apron, letting your eyes half close. The courtyard is the house's unofficial pause button. A few clay jars line the wall mint parsley, and something Greta swears is basil but smells suspiciously like nettle. In one corner, the laundry line sags with shifts and stockings, the cloth stiffening in the heat. The sun paints everything sharper here, so even the cracks in the plaster look deliberate. Mainstream fact slips into your mind: most medieval houses, with even a sliver of yard, grew herbs not for beauty, but for medicine cooking. And if you're honest, for covering smells that otherwise might send visitors fleeing. This house's herbs pull double duty, both for stew and for scattering underfoot before the evening crowd. Somewhere overhead, pigeons coo with the self-importance of tax collectors. You watch one strut along the wall like it's on its way to deliver an edict. The sound of dice from next door is muffled, but still there, punctuated by bursts of triumph or despair. You can tell who's losing by how hard they slam their tankards. Quirky tidbit floats in with the warm air in certain Mediterranean towns. Courtyards doubled as sleeping spaces during the hottest months, with beds dragged outside under makeshift awnings. You've sometimes wondered if the madam would allow it here, though privacy would be about as secure as a gossip's promise. Greta emerges from the back door carrying a mug of watered wine. She flops onto the bench beside you, sighing like she's just completed a pilgrimage. "Hot enough to boil a fish in its own pond," she says, and takes a long swallow. You take the mug when she offers it, the liquid cool against your tongue despite its thinness. Light joke, one drifts in the wine's so weak, it could probably walk into the church without confession. Still, it's wet, and it's yours for a moment, so you don't complain. Beyond the courtyard wall, the shouts of a fishmonger drift in. He's still at it, though the heat must be turning his wares into something less than fresh. A pair of children dash past the open gate, chasing a rag-stuffed ball, their laughter bouncing off the stones. You lean back, letting the bench's sun-warmed wood press between your shoulder blades. The air is heavy enough to slow thought, which is a mercy in its own way. Your fingers trace idle patterns on your skirt, mapping the weave of the cloth, like a familiar road. The madam pokes her head out, scanning the scene like a general counting troops. "Don't cook yourselves," she says. "Evening will need all of you standing." Then she's gone, the door swinging shut on its iron latch. A lazy stillness settles, broken only by the occasional slap of a laundry line in the breeze. You think about the hours ahead, the candles to be lit, the faces to be read, the coins to be coaxed from pockets. But for now, the courtyard holds you like a shallow bowl, letting you breathe in rosemary warm stone and the slow tick of the sun overhead. Light joke too. If heat were coin, you'd all be rich by vespers. Somewhere above, a cloud shifts, throwing a slice of shade across the bench. You don't move, afraid it might change its mind. Greta hums something tuneless, tapping her heel in lazy time. The city outside is a constant moving, selling, shouting. But here, for a few breaths, you have permission to be still. The shade doesn't last. It never does. By the time the bell in the East Tower strikes for the midday trade, you're back inside where the air is marginally cooler and at least the flies know their place. That's when you hear it, the unmistakable clatter of dice and the roar of voices spilling through the thin wall that separates the brothel from the gambling den next door. You've learned the rhythm, the low murmur as coins are wagered, the quick rattle as the dice tumble, then the sudden spike of sound, either joy or outrage, sometimes both. It's like listening to a tavern brawl in miniature. Greta swears the dice men can smell a heavy purse walking past, and you believe her. The madam dislikes the den, but tolerates it. Mainstream fact to file away in many medieval cities, gambling houses were as legal or as frowned upon as brothels, and often existed side by side, both paying peace money to keep the watch from interfering. Two businesses sharing a wall made for easy commerce. Customers could lose at dice and decide to spend what was left in the next building over. From where you stand in the hallway, you can hear the man they call Red Thomas holding court. He's not red from hair. He's red from sunburn, the kind that never quite fades. Luck, he's saying, is a woman with a sharp tongue. Treat her right, she'll kiss you. Treat her wrong, she'll take your purse and your boots. A laugh rolls through the room, then the thud of another tankard on wood. Quirky tidbit, you once heard a priest preach that dice were the devil's bones and should be banned outright. 2 weeks later, you saw that same priest in the den, not gambling himself, but watching like a man memorizing sins for later enjoyment. Historians still argue whether medieval clergy secretly fueled the very vices they condemned. You've stopped arguing and just count on it. The sound draws you toward the side door that connects the two buildings. It's bolted, now always is in daylight, but you know the pattern of knocks the den's keeper uses when he wants a word with the madam. Today, no knock, just noise. Light joke 1, if noise could pay rent, you'd have your own room in a stone house by now. A serving girl slips past you carrying a tray of mugs. She's headed next door. The madam has an arrangement, watered wine for the dice players, at a price that makes them think they're getting away with something. In return, the den's keeper sends his winners your way once their pockets feel heavier than their heads. The floor vibrates faintly as someone slams a fist down in the den. You picture the table-scarred oak rings of dried ale, the dice cup carved with initials that may or may not be curses. You imagine the moment a player leans back in his chair, grinning wide before remembering he still has to pay for that grin. You've seen men leave the den with empty purses and stubborn pride, walking into your door as though the night still had something left to give them. Some of them find it. Others just find more ways to lose. Light joke 2. If the dice are cursed, the curse must be that they always roll in favor of the house. The noise swells again, a cheer this time. Someone's won. That's when you hear the scrape of boots on your side of the wall. A voice, low amused, says, "Might send him over, see if his luck holds." You know what that means. You straighten your shift, smooth your hair, and step into the front room just as the door opens. A man you've never seen before steps in, still laughing from his victory coins, clinking in a pouch at his belt. He smells of sweat smoke, and that peculiar tang of victory that's half confidence, half desperation. The madam sizes him up in an instant, greeting him like an old friend. You stand just far enough back to let him decide where his next wager will be placed. You don't even have to see it to know something's gone wrong in the street. The sound hits, first a sharp crash, then the scrape of wood against stone, followed by the angry tangle of voices that can only mean a fight is blooming. You're in the front room, folding a length of the madder red ribbon you bought at market, when the shouts sharpen enough to pull you toward the window. Outside, two men are squared off in the middle of the lane, their boots planted wide, shoulders hunched like oxen about to lock horns. One's in a leather jerkin, the other in a stained tunic that might have been white in another lifetime. Between them lies the cause, a tipped ale cart, its load bleeding into the gutter froth, catching the sun. A third man, probably the carter, is trying to shout sense into both, but it's like throwing pebbles at a fire. Mainstream fact, you can't help but recall street brawls in medieval towns weren't rare, but they were risky. City watchmen could find both parties regardless of who started it, and in some places, fighting within the market quarter could mean a night in the pillory. Still, men fought over spilt ale, unpaid debts, or simply because someone looked at someone else too long. The first punch lands a sloppy, shoulder-driven thing that glances off the leather jerkin. He staggers, recovers, and answers with a shove that sends the tunic man into the cartwheel. The cart groans. The wheel squeals. A chicken. Why there's a chicken you have no idea erupts from somewhere under the cart wings, flapping, adding its protest to the mix. Quirky tidbit. There's an old superstition that if a fight breaks out near your doorway, you should toss a bucket of water to cool the heat and keep bad luck from stepping inside. You've seen the madam do it once, and whether it was the water or her glare, the fight dissolved like sugar in tea. But she's not here now. It's you and the other girls pressed at the shutter's edge. Greta leans in, muttering, "5 coppers," says the leather one wins. You raise an eyebrow. You've seen the tunic man take hits and stay standing longer than anyone expects. Light joke, one drifts in this city, betting on fights is the only thing that unites fighters and spectators alike. The brawl tilts. Leather jerkin grabs Tunic's collar and tries to swing him toward the wall, but Tunic hooks a foot around the cart, and both go stumbling sideways. The cart tips harder. The remaining ale barrels strain against their ropes, one slipping free and rolling toward the gutter. A boy darts in from nowhere trying to catch it and nearly gets bowled over. The watching crowd roars at the near miss as though it were sport. From down the lane, the distinct metallic clatter of the watch's halberds announces their approach. The crowd begins to thin, no one wants to be witnessed too closely. The fighters, of course, don't notice. Tunic lands a punch that snaps Leather's head back. Leather answers with a knee to the thigh that makes you wince from here. Light joke too, if they put this much effort into hauling water from the well, the whole city would smell better. The watch arrives, 3 men in mismatched bits of livery, looking equal parts bored and irritated. The tallest steps between the fighters, shoving them apart with the ease of a man who's done this 100 times. The other 2 start collecting names or coins, more likely. There's some gesturing, some muttered bargaining. Eventually, Leather Jerkin tosses a small purse to the nearest watchman. And just like that, the fight is over. The ale cart is righted, the chicken captured by a laughing boy, and the lane begins to breathe again. From your window, you see Tunic limp off toward the dice den, while leather disappears in the opposite direction. The froth in the gutter is already thinning, carried away toward the river. Greta sighs. "Should have bet on the watch," she says. You smile faintly, stepping back from the window as the street returns to its usual churn. The street is barely settled again when an unfamiliar shadow stretches across the doorway. At first you think it's another customer from the dice den, but then you see the robe, brown wool, creased from travel hood, thrown back to reveal a tonsured crown catching the light. A parish priest of all people standing in the threshold of a licensed house in broad daylight. The room stills in that subtle way people do when something doesn't fit. The madam, halfway through counting a small stack of coins, doesn't miss a beat. She slides the last coin into the ledger box and greets him like he's walked into a tailor's shop. "Father," she says smoothly, "to what do we owe the visit?" Mainstream fact threads through your mind. In many medieval towns, clergy were technically barred from entering brothels, but exceptions, real or imagined, were made for pastoral visits, moral inspections, or more often the collection of charitable donations for the church. Whether those coins ever saw the poor was another matter. The priest steps inside, clasping his hands as though they might wander without supervision. His eyes dart quick, assessing but not toward the ceiling, as a man shielding himself from temptation might. Instead, he seems to be cataloging faces, furniture, perhaps the quality of the candlelight. He smells faintly of incense and road dust, and there's a damp edge to his hem, as though he's walked through the start of the rain. Quirky tidbit: you once overheard some priests carried a small vial of holy water, specifically for blessing the rooms of wayward parishioners. Whether it blessed the rooms or simply marked territory is anyone's guess. You catch yourself wondering if he has such a vial in the pouch at his belt. The madam gestures toward a chair, but he declines, preferring to stand near the door, half in and half out. He asks after her health, the health of the house, the moral well-being of the girls, phrased with the kind of gravity that's meant to sound pastoral, but lands somewhere closer to theatrical. You busy your hands straightening a curtain, ears tilted toward their exchange. He mentions the upcoming feast day and the importance of public order, his tone dipping now and then into something that might almost be a request. The madam nods in all the right places, offering non-committal sounds that neither promise nor refuse. Light joke one flickers through your mind: if sermons were coins, this man could afford beeswax candles in every room. At one point, his gaze lingers too long to be accidental on the small table near the hearth, where the madam keeps her better pewter cups. "Fine workmanship," he says, as though testing the weight of the moment. She smiles faintly and agrees they pour just as well as they look. Historians still argue whether such visits were about enforcing moral codes, skimming coin under the guise of charity, or simply satisfying curiosity. Watching him now, you suspect it's a braid of all three. The rain outside grows more insistent, pattering against the bubbled glass of the front window. He adjusts his robe, glances once more around the room, and finally produces a small, folded parchment. A notice, he says, regarding parish expectations during the feast. The madam accepts it with the polite dip of someone receiving an uninvited fruitcake. Light joke, too: parish expectations usually mean they expect your purse to be lighter. After a few more pleasantries, though, the warmth in the word is more cloth than fire. He steps back onto the street hood, up this time against the rain. The madam watches him go, then sets the parchment on the mantel without opening it. "We'll read it when we need a bedtime story," she says, and the girls exhale the breath they'd been holding. The curtain you'd been fussing with still isn't straight, but you leave it. The room feels lighter without his shadow, and the afternoon resumes its slow coil toward evening. The house exhales after the priest leaves, and so do you. Afternoon settles in like a cat circling, kneading, finally curling in the windowsill. The rain has softened to a hush on the glass, and the front room's chatter thins to a thread. It's the hour for mending, for small repairs and smaller confessions, for finding out which seams are lying about their strength. You fetch your work basket from under the bench, a battered wooden thing that has learned to keep secrets. Inside the tools of quiet salvation, bone-handled awl, 2 needles, 1 honest steel, 1 a little bent but loyal, a roll of brown thread the tailor threw in like a magician, reversing a trick. Your new madder ribbon coiled like a sleeping ember, and the off-white linen remnant you bargained for. The youngest girl, Lisa, slips onto the stool opposite with a dress balled in her arms. It's the blue one she swears makes her eyes seem steadier than her voice. The hem has given up on one side. A tear runs from knee to mid-calf like a river that changed its mind. Caught on the stair nail, she says, cheeks lifting with the apology she always wears when cloth fails. You smooth the fabric across your lap fingers, reading the weave the way readers scan a page. We'll make the river a lake, you tell her, and she smiles at the notion of pausing something that usually rushes. You thread the needle tongue between teeth, breadth the size of a pinhole, and start a small backstitch even as fence posts. The house's noises sift in a tray clink from the kitchen, the soft whomp of the front door, as a breeze has an opinion, the far-off dice rattle editing the silence next door. Your fingers find a tempo that matches the rain, steady, forgiving. Tell me one that's true. Lisa says, chin on her hands, eyes tracking your needle like a swallow tracking a mote. She always asks this way, as if true stories are skylarks you might coax to land on the table between you. All stories are true, you say, for the person telling them. She makes a face that wants to be wise and is mostly sweet. All right, you concede, true and useful. You begin with something small, the apple seller's scale and the beetle's iron pound, how the weights kiss and argue, and in the end, make a fair measure. Lisa's mouth quirks. Wish there was an iron pound for men's promises, she says. There is, you answer. It's called tomorrow morning. Light joke 1 floats up and out, gentle enough to land without a splash. She giggles behind her fingers, then sobers as you set the hem back in line and tie off a neat knot. Mainstream fact slides into the room like a schoolmaster late to class. Linen for underthings, wool for warmth, you say, tapping the dress, and law for show. Sumptuary rules still run their thread through town, certain colors and furs reserved for ranks you don't dine with. Historians still argue whether women like us wore brighter hues than we're painted in today. You add feeding the needle along, or if soap, sun, and city air shaded every wardrobe toward market dust. Lisa glances at the madder ribbon in your basket. Bright enough, she says, and you tuck a stray thought of feast day blue beside it. She volunteers a tale, now hers always begin the same way Greta said. Today, Greta said the guard captain's ferret, the mythical one that lives under his helmet, escaped, and now runs the night watch better than he does. You keep your face neutral as you stitch. If the ferret collects fines, you say we'll set out a saucer. Light joke 2 earns another peal of laughter. It threads neatly through the fabric of the hour. You test the hem, give it a tug that pretends to be a staircase nail. It holds. You smooth the blue warmth into her hands, and she strokes the line where your needle traveled as if memorizing a road home. Again, she says, producing a sleeve with a gap at the seam. You nod. Patterns repeat. That's their kindness. The youngest girl's chatter is a weather vane for the house. Today it points toward marvels. A peddler who sells Egyptian coal that makes lashes long enough to fan a room. A charm of red thread tied around the ankle to keep envy from sneaking up the stairs. A recipe for breath apples pricked with cloves and brushed with rose water, guaranteed to make a boy see stars. quirky tidbit slips in sync. There's a divination, she says, where you peel an apple in one long strip and toss it over your shoulder. The letter it forms is your true love's initial. You raise one eyebrow. And what letter did yours make? She blushes. A snake. You deadpan, then avoid the dice den. Light joke 3 lands as softly as the rain, needle in, needle out. Every pull whispers a reminder that small things mend big days. You pinch a tuck where the sleeve wants to flare. Lisa holds the cloth, taut tongue poking from the corner of her mouth in concentration. You could take work at a tailor's, she says, reverent. Tailors want apprentices who can read the guild rules without squinting. You reply, and let the debate line slide in with the thread. Historians still argue whether working women in cities read more than we think, learning from ledgers, signs, and prayer cards, or whether most readings stayed locked behind church doors and guild benches. You can read coin columns and saints' days on the calendar pinned above the hearth. You can read faces like they're posted proclamations. Sometimes it's enough. You pause to flex your fingers, sewing pulls at tendons you never notice, until they complain like floorboards on wet days. You press your knuckles into your palm, feel the small grit of tallow and rosemary from the morning's sweep. The room smells faintly of both, with a new thread of stew beginning to speak from the kitchen. Your stomach lifts its head, hopeful. Rabbit Lisa asks, nose tilted like a hound's. If the madam's luck held, you say, else the stew will be very confident about onions. She watches you swap the steel needle for the bent one. You use the bent for curves, a trick learned from a seamstress who mended sails by the river. Boats and sleeves, that woman told you, both carry passengers. Both drown if you don't respect the seam. You pass the bent needle through the fabric's arc, and the dress stops trying to pretend it's a flag. Rain thickens for a minute, patters the sill with a patience you admire. The dice den is quieter, an omen or a nap. You glance at the window and see your reflection, faint and soft, a ghost who knows how to pin her hair in low light. The pewter pin holds. You think of the priest's parchment on the mantle, folded like a mouth, trying not to comment. What do you think it says? Lisa asks, following your gaze. That we should wear ribbons the color of obedience, you say, and close early so our coins arrive at the parish in daylight. Your voice lands wry, but not bitter. Bitterness eats thread. She leans closer, conspiratorial. Do you believe in the charm Greta hid behind the cracked tile? You picture the tiny clay eye-hand swirls trio, the way your fingertip found its cool surface this morning. I believe in habits that keep hands steady, you say, and in anything that convinces floorboards to behave. Her laugh is quiet this time, a spool unraveling just enough. You set the sleeve aside, reach for your off-white remnant. While the needle is warm, you murmur, cutting a narrow strip to edge the neckline that always tries to stretch. You couch the new strip over the old edge, anchoring future washings to a promise. Lisa watches as if you're binding a spell. In a way, you are against sag, against fray, against the sort of creeping surrender clothes learned from hard use. Mainstream fact returns more direct. Linen likes to lie flat, you tell her. Wool forgives, linen remembers. It's why underclothes last and last with care. And why your shift, though mended twice at the side seam, still behaves when asked. You show her a herringbone tack to keep the lining from rolling, and she repeats it, clumsy first, then less so. Your hands'll thank you in winter, you promise. Seams that sit right don't chafe. A lull spreads comfortable shawl-like. You take out your pomander, roll it in your palm until the clove warmth rises. Lisa inhales. Smells like feast day. Smells like a pocket that remembers it's a garden. You counter and tuck it back. The house holds quiet, till a pigeon on the sill decides to audition for the watch with an indignant coo. You flick a finger at the air. The bird, insulted, relocates its sermon to a gutter. She asks for one more true thing. You offer a small one you've been hoarding, how the candle's lip will overflow if you nudge it, and how the spill, once cooled, can be scraped and pressed into a new stub that burns as if it were born for the job. There's a lesson, Lisa says. There's rent, you say. You both grin at the honesty. Historians still argue whether houses like yours formed families or merely temporary alliances, whether the tenderness you see in the madam's braid fixing and shoulder patting is policy or affection grown in poor soil. You don't settle the question today. You tie off the last thread, bite it clean, and stroke the finished seam with your thumb as if sealing a letter. The kitchen door swings and a spoon wraps the pot rim a summons. You pass the mended dress back the blue, now whole, where it had been almost story. Lisa hugs it like a rescued child. Teach me the river to lake stitch again after stew, she asks. After stew, you agree. She darts away to hang the garment where it won't learn wrinkles, then turns back, and without thinking too hard, squeezes your fingers quick. Grateful, the kind of touch that says seen better than any sermon. You gather the basket's small arsenal, lay the needles straight. Stroke the ribbon once, just to feel its promise. The rain decides to take a rest. Somewhere a cartwheel avoids the hole you could name, and you feel pleased for the nameless driver. Afternoon has become later afternoon without asking your permission. You stand your knees offering their editorial comments, and the bench returns their opinion in creaks. Hush, you tell them both, and they listen. In the hallway, the stew's onion confidence meets Rosemary's memory and decides they're cousins. You and Lisa fall into step a seam's width apart, and the house leans toward evening like a boat finding current. The dice den rattles back to life. The priest's parchment remains folded. The clay charm minds its quiet watch. And you, with thread dust on your fingertips and a new stitch in your pocket, are ready to trade mending for the next kind of work the day will ask for. The front room is calm in that way. Only late afternoon can manage sunlight slanting low enough to turn the moats into golden drift. The air warm, but with the first hint of cool evening threading in. You've barely had time to set your work basket aside when the door creaks open and a man steps in. He's middle height, middle age, middle everything, except for the way his eyes flicker too quickly left and right, like he's trying to take inventory before someone notices. His clothes are neat enough, a wool tunic in the brown-green shade of market stalls, hose without holes, but his hands fidget at his belt. That's the first clue. The second comes when he pulls a small coin purse halfway from under his cloak, then tucks it back in, as though unsure whether it wants to be seen. You've seen this type before, the opportunist. Mainstream fact slides into place. Pickpocketing was common enough in medieval towns that some cities posted laws against bringing coin into certain taverns without declaring it first, the idea being to deter thieves by making the act more noticeable. Whether it worked is debatable. Most thieves were skilled enough to take what they wanted before a victim even reached the bar. The madam is in the back, so you step forward with a smile just big enough to be polite. "Can I help you?" You ask, letting your gaze rest on his face rather than his twitchy hands. "Just looking," he says, which is funny because there's nothing here to just look at unless you plan to spend. He drifts toward the corner where a set of pewter cups sits on the low table. You know the trick: a man will distract with talk, compliment the candles, ask about the weather, while his other hand lightens the room of something small and portable. And sure enough, his gaze sticks a moment too long on the coin dish near the mantel where the girls sometimes leave their share. before handing it to the madam. Light joke one floats through your head. If staring could melt metal, you'd be selling puddles instead of coins. You keep the space between you casual, but close enough to block the most direct route to the door. The weather's turning, you say, glancing toward the shutter. He mumbles agreement, still scanning, still cataloging. That's when you see it, the slight dip of his shoulder, the curl of his fingers, the quick shift of his weight toward the mantel. Quirky tidbit flashes in your mind. In some port cities, women who worked in public houses were trained to spot pickpockets, not to protect the house's goods, but because returning a stolen item to a wealthy patron could earn a tip bigger than the item itself. Here, the tip is more likely to be the madam's approval, which is worth more in the long run. You step sideways, as if to straighten the curtain, and in doing so block his reach. Lovely work on this weave, you say, brushing your fingers over the cloth on the bench. His hand hesitates mid-air before retreating into the fold of his cloak. He forces a smile that's all teeth and no eyes. Historians still argue whether women in houses like yours were more skilled at spotting danger in a face or a hand. You'd say both, but right now it's the hand you're watching. The madam chooses this moment to reappear, voice brisk. Looking for someone in particular, she asks. The man stammers something about passing through, about maybe coming back later. She tilts her head toward the door in a way that's both an invitation and an ending. Light joke too, if exits were sold in the market, he just got the deluxe model, fast and polite. He mumbles a farewell and slips out his cloak, catching on the latch as though the house wants one last word. The madam doesn't ask what he wanted. She already knows. She just glances at the coin dish, then at you, and gives a single nod. That's the approval. You straighten the curtain for real this time, the pewter cups still in their place, the coins untouched. Outside, the light has shifted again, and you can feel the street leaning toward evening. Somewhere next door, the dice rattle, and you suspect the man who just left will find a different way to lose his coin before nightfall. Evening doesn't sneak into the house. It sweeps in like a tide, bringing with it the scent of roasting meat from the tavern down the street, the laughter of men already warmed by ale, and the shifting light that turns every corner a shade deeper. You and Greta move through the front room, lighting the oil lamps, each flame catching with a small whoosh before settling into a steady glow. The candles on the mantel and tables follow their tallow smell, mingling with the rosemary scattered earlier. By the time the last lamp is lit, the room has transformed. Shadows are softer now, the roughness of the furniture blurred into something almost inviting. This is the hour the madam calls the rush, when the street's foot traffic bends toward places like yours, drawn by light, warmth, and whatever else the night promises. Mainstream fact flickers in your mind. In many medieval towns, the most profitable hours for licensed brothels weren't the deep night, but the early evening when men came straight from market or workshop, with coins still in their pockets. Later hours belong to taverns, dice dens, and trouble. The first to arrive is a baker's apprentice, flour still in the creases of his hands. He pays for ale and a song from one of the girls who can carry a tune, laughing at himself when his voice cracks, trying to join in. Then a pair of merchants come in together, smelling of wool bales, and arguing about shipping fees until the madam separates them with the ease of a woman parting squabbling children. The noise builds in, layers murmured negotiations, the scrape of mugs on wood, a burst of laughter from the corner where Greta is holding court. You move among the tables with the other girls, topping off drinks, smoothing tablecloths, offering a hand to help someone out of his wet cloak. The dice den next door is in full roar, its shouts and cheers leaking through the wall like a bass drum under the melody here. Quirky tidbit drifts in as you work. Some houses hung small bells over the door, not just for decoration, but so the madam could gauge the night's pace without leaving her ledger. You have no bell, just the creak of hinges and the smell of the street as each new arrival steps in. Near the hearth, a man is telling a joke so long-winded it could be mistaken for a sermon. Across the room, two sailors trade bawdy songs with the enthusiasm of men who know they'll be at sea again by dawn. At one table, an older patron sits with his back to the wall, eyes scanning the room between sips. You've seen him before, always careful, always alone. Light joke 1. If watching were a paying job, he'd own the building by now. The madam moves like a chess master, adjusting the room without anyone noticing, shifting a chair here, dimming a lamp there, sending one girl upstairs while pulling another to greet a late arrival. You catch her eye once, and she flicks her gaze toward a man who's just stepped in, a merchant you remember from market day. His purse heavy then, and likely heavier now. Historians still argue whether these evening gatherings were more about business or camaraderie. Watching the way men linger over their ale, you'd say it's both coin changes hands. But so do stories, news, and the small, strange comfort of being in a room where everyone pretends the world outside doesn't exist. You pass a table where a group of younger men are toasting the feast day ribbon you bought. One of them asks if you'll wear it tonight. You laugh and say maybe if they keep the toasts short enough to leave you breath for singing later. The fire crackles, the lamps flicker as the door opens again, and you can feel the night's momentum building. The rush is here, and it will carry you with it until the candles burn low and the street grows quiet again. The door swings open again, and this time the figure framed in the lamplight isn't a regular. His cloak is deep blue, lined with fur that doesn't see much rain, and the boots under it have never met the gutter mud you dodge daily. A nobleman of some rank at least steps inside the room's hum, dipping as eyes turn his way. He doesn't move like the usual evening trade. His pace is measured, gaze steady, and when the madam approaches with her usual half smile, he murmurs something too low for the rest of you to catch. She tilts her head, considering, then gestures subtly toward you. Mainstream fact: in many medieval cities, men of rank were both the most prized and the most dangerous patrons. They could spend enough in one night to cover a week's rent, but their tempers, secrets, and politics could sink a house if handled poorly. Licensed brothels were often expected to show special courtesy to such men, even when the courtesy was as much strategy as hospitality. You step forward, meeting his eyes for just long enough to read the intent there, direct, unsmiling, but not unkind. A room, he says quietly, with a lock, and no interruptions. His voice has that clipped precision of someone accustomed to being obeyed. You nod once. Quirky tidbit floats in as you lead him toward the stairs. Some noble clients brought their own linens, or even cushions, fearing disease or bad luck from sleeping on a bed used by commoners. You glance at his empty hands. He's traveling light, but his purse must be heavier than it looks. The stairs groan under his measured steps. Halfway up, you notice the faint scent of lavender clinging to his cloak, a fragrance not grown in these streets. He keeps a pace just behind you, eyes likely marking every turn in the narrow hallway. At the landing, you unlock the far corner room, the one with the thicker door and the latch that doesn't squeal. Inside, you move through the small rituals candle on the table lamp, trimmed shutters drawn tight. He steps in without removing his cloak, scanning the room like a commander mapping a battlefield. When he finally turns to you, his expression is unreadable. "You understand discretion?" he asks. Light joke 1 flickers through your mind. In this house, discretion might as well be stitched into the curtains. But you only say yes. He sets a small velvet pouch on the table. The sound it makes when it lands, dense, soft, tells you more than looking inside ever could. For the time he says, and the silence. You nod again, tucking the pouch under your palm and sliding it to the far corner. Historians still argue whether noble visits to houses like yours were purely for pleasure, or whether they doubled as covert meeting spots. Given the way this man glances toward the door every few minutes, you suspect the latter. As you tend to the small tasks, straightening the coverlet, setting the chair just so you keep one ear on the hall. Downstairs, the evening rush continues, the laughter and clink of mugs muffled through the floorboards. Here, the air is still. He doesn't offer more than his request for quiet, and you don't ask. The work tonight is not in talk, but in keeping the edges of the world outside from creeping under the door. When he finally loosens the clasp of his cloak, he drapes it over the chair rather than the bed, a soldier's neatness in the gesture. Light joke, too, drifts past. If every guest treated the furniture like this, the madam's repair bill would be a foot shorter. The candle burns lower, its flame steady in the calm air. Whatever business brought him here will remain between the walls and your memory, unspoken and undisturbed. That, after all, is what the pouch of coins truly paid for. When he's ready to leave, he fastens the cloak with a quiet efficiency, nods once, and slips out into the hallway without a backward glance. You wait until his boots have faded down the stairs before opening the shutters to let the lamplight breathe again. You descend the stairs into the warm, edible air of the kitchen, where the stew announces itself before anyone does. The pot is big enough to baptize a cat, and based on the noises, it makes a more willing convert than most cats would be. Steam ghosts up, carrying onion parsley, a memory of pepper, and something darker underneath that suggests rabbit if the madam's morning bargaining went her way. You lift the lid a cautious inch. Yes, rabbit. The meat pulls away from the bone like it has other plans for the evening. Greta stands over the pot with the kind of authority usually reserved for magistrates and choir directors. She stirs, tastes, declares needs salt, then adds exactly the amount the last girl added when she said perfect as is. Kitchen democracy, medieval edition. You tear a heel from the brown loaf dip and feel the day rewire itself from the inside out. Light joke one, if stew were currency, this house would be minting coins by the ladle. The kitchen is where information reduces to gossip boiled down until only the thick truths remain. The serving girl Mina comes in from the alley door, cheeks pink from the cooler air, carrying a jug of water and an expression that says she has news but needs a stage. She doesn't bother with a stage. Dice Den's keeper just posted a name, she announces, dropping her voice even though it's only the three of you. Blacklisted. You trade a glance with Greta. Blacklists aren't uncommon, but they're rarely interesting unless they intersect with your world. Who's, you ask, tearing the bread into diplomatic confetti? A man called Hob Cutter Mina, says, ticking her chin toward the wall as if the name might walk through it. Owes the den, owes the tavern, owes the barber for a shave he swears he never received. She adds with relish, and owes us. Greta's spoon stops mid-orbit. For what? For thinking a promise and a wink are legal tender, Mina says. Madam told him last week to try the parish for credit. He tried. Parish told him to try the river. Light joke too drifts in. At least the river pays its debts, every spill finds the sea. Mainstream fact checks its hat at the door. City economies run on more than coin. Tallies, chalk marks, and verbal credit keep the poorer quarters moving. But when your name goes chalked on the wrong door, Dice Den Baker Brothel, you start finding shutters that don't open for you. Licensed houses like yours may be lenient on rainy nights, but ledger pages remember what hearts would rather forget. Greta slants you a look. He's the one who tried to borrow a comb and return a flea, she says. Ah, that one. The stew bubbles in sympathetic distaste. Madam told the keeper we're aligned, Mina adds. No service for Hob until his purse remembers math. You nod. The kitchen exhales as if the matter is settled, but the air holds a wrinkle, a second piece of news hiding behind the first. Mina rolls her eyes toward the window slit. "Guards are skirting our door tonight," she says. "Not just the big one with the knees. All of them. Like we're contagious." You stop mid-chew. The watch avoids your door for two reasons. Either they've decided to make a point and want witnesses to miss the show, or they've been reminded by someone with a velvet purse that their route this evening lies elsewhere. Historians still argue whether the peace money houses paid was formalized policy or a private arrangement disguised as tradition. You've never seen a receipt, only a pattern most weeks. The watch swings by at third bell, takes a cup of watered wine, looks meaningfully at the shutter latch, and continues. When they don't, it means heat politics or both. Greta tastes again salt, now perfect because she says so, and lowers the flame with the palm dance of someone who learned to cook by not burning down rooms. "What did the madam say, you ask?" Mina grins. "She said, if the watch won't watch, we'll watch for free and charge later. Then she told me to keep my ears open and my mouth shut, and to tell you the same, but with more emphasis. You salute with your bread heel. Orders received." Quirky Tidbit wanders in, smelling faintly of spice. Some households hang little bundles of bay leaves and garlic near doors to keep hot words from entering an herb bouncer for the mouth. The madam keeps rosemary by the threshold, but tonight she's tied a twist of red thread to the inner latch, a sign you've only seen on winter feast days when boys get rowdy. It says we're open, but not foolish. The kitchen door bumps, and Lisa slips in, eyes bright, apron smudged with flour she probably wore on purpose to look useful. "Is that rabbit?" she asks, though the pot is declaring itself clearly enough to reach the front room. "Mostly," Greta says. "Partly onion with rabbit privilege." You pass Lisa a bowl, and she receives it like sacrament. Between mouthfuls, she reports the noble from upstairs left quietly. The madam counted his pouch in her head and didn't blink. So fortunes on two legs came and went, and the ledger will sleep easier. Greta ladles out portions for the house girls first, then serving work. The bowls line up along the table, steam lifting like a wardrobe of ghosts. You sling a cloth over your forearm, kitchen habit, and carry two bowls toward the front. As you pass the door, you catch the red thread again, a slash of steady color. Lisa whispers, "Do red threads really ward off envy?" You say they ward off forgetting, which is more useful. In the front room, the rush has matured from tide to current. The baker's apprentice has flour handprints on the table like he's branded the furniture. The careful older patron still sits back-to-wall eyes doing inventory on behalf of a future he doesn't trust. The dice den roars, dips, roars. Someone's luck is running up the stairs and tripping down again. On your way back to the kitchen, the alley wafts in a draft, and a voice you almost know, a bleary tenor practicing charm. Hob Cutter. You angle a glance through the slit. A man in a frayed cap loiters under the eave, pretending to be sheltering from rain that has already packed up for the night. He hesitates when two watchmen pass the lane mouth, then squares his shoulders at their retreating backs, a brave pose reserved for when authority is no longer looking. You file it. The stew isn't the only thing simmering. Back in the kitchen, the madam appears without sound, a talent that saves, scares, and settles in equal measure. She lifts the lid, inhales, nods. Good. Then to you, our friends with halberds are needed near the Guildhall. Keep the floor steady. You know what that means? Don't let a quarrel grow legs. Don't take credit from red caps. Close the shutters if the den erupts. And Hob, you ask. Hob is learning that doors remember, she says. Let him learn. Her voice is soft, which is how you know the decision is sharp. Mainstream fact threads itself into the Steam City feasts and guild meetings, drew the watch like moths, To wax official gatherings needed uniforms on corners to keep the civic tale neat. Nights like this, streets on your side of town, grew their own rules, enforced by women who managed rooms and men who respected those rooms, because otherwise they didn't get to come back. Regulation by reputation, older than charters, cheaper than chains. Greta dishes another ladle into your bowl and bumps your hip. Eat, she commands. No sewing on stew, the needle can wait. You obey because she's right, and because the stew has developed that end-of-pot richness that turns bread into memory. The rabbit gives itself up entirely in your mouth onion, telling a bright story around it parsley, underlining the important words. Light joke 3. If saints performed soup miracles, they probably started with a pot this size, and a woman like Greta swatting unhelpful hands away. Mina leans in. Oh, and the dice den keeper swears the captain's back by second bell. He says the captain owes him 3 games and a public apology for pretending not to be superstitious. You smile into your bowl. The ferret rumor has a long tail tonight. Does the keeper believe in curses, you ask? He believes in patterns, Mina says. Curses that pay on time. You swallow a laugh with stew and find it improves both. A clatter from the scullery announces the arrival of plates that would like to be cleaner and are willing to negotiate. Lisa volunteers a turn at the tub. You trade her your spot at the hearth for the rinse bench sleeves rolled to elbows. Warm water, a scrap of lye soap bowls presented like confessions and absolutions. The routine steadies you, circular motions, edges checked, set to drip. It gives the ears room to work, while the mouth keeps quiet. Mina topping mugs lets another whisper slide across the table. Word is a city scribe lost the alderman's private account book. The kind that lists who pays to be forgotten. Greta snorts. Those books never get lost. They go for a walk. Historians still argue whether the great scandals of towns like yours began with ledger entries or with gossip that ledgermen tried to erase after the fact. Either way, lost books make found trouble. You think of the nobleman's lavender cloak and the way he watched the door more than the room. Some pages prefer not to be turned. The stew retreats toward its last ladles. Greta chases fond with a splash of ale-brown scrapings, lifting like yesterday's worry. You wipe your hands, tie the cloth back at your waist, and let the kitchen's warmth sink into your bones before the evening pulls heat out of you again. The madam lifts the lid one more time, considers, then douses the flame. Enough, she decrees. Save the rest for bread tomorrow. Tomorrow nods politely from the corner. Before you go, you touch the red thread at the latch, just a fingertip, like greeting a small household god. Habit hedge, hello. The kitchen satisfied releases you. You step into the corridor with the taste of rabbit on your tongue and the feel of a rumor between your shoulder blades. The house is fuller now. Voices are higher not from anger, but from effort, the effort of being seen the way one wishes to be. You adjust a lamp wick, pinch a candle lip, and ease a chair back into its approved angle. The watch may be occupied by Guildhall speeches and velvet purses, but your watch is here, rosemary on the floor. Ribbon in your pocket, stew warming the quiet between sentences. Hob loiters somewhere beyond the door. The captain's rumor circles like a ferret looking for a hat. You keep your ears open and your mouth for now shut. When you pass the mantle, the priest's folded parchment sits, as you left it, a stiff piece of should in a room full of can and must. You resist the urge to poke it into the dying fire just to watch ink learn humility. Instead, you straighten the tiny clay charm behind the cracked tile, the eye, the hand, the swirl. Mind the door, you tell it under your breath. It's not that you believe it works. You believe you work better after saying it. The stew in your belly becomes lamp oil in your veins, steady burn, clean flame. You take your place at the edge of the room where you can see the street, the den, the stairs, and the bowl of coins at once. The evening has more pages. You turn the next one with care. The rain has stopped, but the air carries its ghost cooler now sharp enough to raise goose flesh along your arms. The front door's hinges croak as it opens, and in steps trouble you've met before, a broad-shouldered man with the face of someone who's chewed too many grudges. His eyes find you before the latch falls shut. You know that look. It's the same one he wore the night he decided his coin bought more than it did. He doesn't even wait for the madam's greeting. You, he says, voice low enough to make the room lean in without meaning to. We need to talk. Mainstream fact slots into your mind like a warning bell. Brothel keepers in many towns kept an informal blacklist, not just for unpaid debts, but for men who brought more heat than profit. Returning after earning a place on it was bold or stupid, often both. You keep your face neutral the way you would with a dog whose tail is wagging but whose teeth are showing. Evening, you say, giving him no more than the word deserves. He steps closer, the room shrinking around him. You think I don't know, he says. You think I haven't heard what you've been telling people. Behind him. Greta shifts subtly, placing herself near the hearth poker. The madam's gaze sharpens from across the room, a silent measure of distance and timing. The man is close enough now that you can smell the ale riding his breath, layered over something sharper, anger that's had all afternoon to ferment. Quirky tidbit surfaces even now in some towns. Disputes inside licensed houses had to be settled in the presence of a city-appointed peacewoman, an official role meant to protect both workers and patrons. Your city has no such post. Here the madam is the law between these walls. And she's already moving. Light joke one flickers dark in your head. This man's about to learn the house has better bouncers than the dice den. I don't know what you've heard, you tell him, voice steady, but it wasn't from me. You don't step back. You don't step forward. You hold the ground like you'd hold a stitch, tight enough not to slip, loose enough not to tear. The madam arrives at his shoulder, her presence like a door swinging shut. We have rules, she says. Her tone isn't sharp, but it's iron wrapped in wool. And you know them. He turns, tries to loom, but she is not a woman who notices being loomed over. You owe coin, she continues, and respect. You can pay one now and show the other later, or you can leave without spending either. Historians still argue whether brothel keepers acted as protectors out of genuine care or pure economics. Watching the way she positions herself between you and the man you know, it doesn't matter, the effect is the same. For a heartbeat, you think he might test her. His jaw works. Then his eyes flick to Greta by the hearth, to Mina in the corner holding the door latch, and to the room full of witnesses who will remember every detail if he pushes this further. He mutters something sour and turns toward the door. Light joke too comes. As relief, some men think leaving is an insult. Here it's a gift. The door closes on his back, the latch clicking like a period at the end of a sentence. The madam exhales, not heavily, but enough that you know she'd been ready to act. She glances at you. You all right? She asks, and you nod. The room hums back to life conversations, picking up where they left off. The stew's smell has mellowed into the air, the candles burn steady, and outside the street resumes its rhythm. But you know the man's shadow will be back eventually, either in person or in rumor. For now you smooth your skirt, return to your place by the window, and let the light from the lamps soak into your skin. The house is whole again, and so are you. The first warning is the lantern flame by the door. It bends sideways like it's trying to whisper to the wall. Then the wind finds the alley, squeezes through with a low, hollow moan, and the night remembers it owes you a storm. Rain begins in polite taps, the kind that make you think of washing herbs in a bowl. 10 heartbeats later, politeness is over. Water throws itself at the shutters with such enthusiasm you half expect it to knock and ask to come in for stew. You move to the window and lay your palm flat on the wood. It vibrates faintly, rain is percussion, and tonight it's brought drums. Somewhere upstreet, a horse snorts, hooves skidding. The smell rides the wind. A second later, wet leather mud iron and the city's flat penny tang growing brighter in the damp. The candle nearest the glass gutters. You cup it, steadying the flame with a hand that remembers a dozen such nights. Light joke 1, if you were paid by how many candles you rescue from melodrama, you'd retire to a cottage that never leaks. Greta darts past with a basket of rags and a confidence that says she's negotiated with weather before. Sills she orders, tossing you a wad of cloth that used to be a shift back when it believed in better days. You press it into the bottom seam where the shutter meets the sill. The cloth drinks like a sailor. Another rag goes beneath the back door. A third under the stairs' first tread, which always weeps on storm nights, as if stairs had feelings about gravity. Mainstream fact threads itself into the drumroll medieval streets weren't kind to rain. With patchwork paving and open gutters, water ran where it pleased, carrying market filth downhill and collecting in ruts that learned the shape of every cartwheel. Houses like yours fought back with shutters, sills, and occasionally sacrificial furniture, nothing like wedging a bench against a door and telling weather to take the hint. You've watched the madam argue with wind in 3 languages. She usually wins, but wind enjoys the conversation. The dice den next door answers the storm with louder dice, because men who've had ale believe volume is a charm against weather. The den's keeper bangs a ladle on a keg 3 clanks that means shut the outer door or you're mopping. You grin despite yourself. Across the way, a shutter slaps loose. A boy scrambles up a barrel to hook it back, hair-plastered, flat grin sharp as a fish knife. He takes a bow no one asked for and vanishes inside to present his heroics to a room that will applaud if he tells it right. A wet, impatient draft fingers the hem of your skirt. You fetch the little oil lamp and trim it, then adjust the room the way a captain trims. Sails lamp here, chair there, nothing that can catch a splash left sulking in harm's way. The madam arrives with a coil of rope and a small hammer ties a fast hitch on the front latch, as if she's mooring a boat to the house. She likes to breathe, she murmurs to the door, but not tonight. She taps the rope knot as one might pat a dog's flank, good girl. The red thread you touched earlier glows dully against the wood rain, flattening its fuzz to silk. Quirky tidbit wanders in with a wet sleeve. Some households scatter salt at the threshold during a storm, not for flavor, but to keep wandering souls from strolling in on the back of thunder. You've never seen the madam waste salt so boldly, but you have seen her lay a single iron nail on a windowsill for luck when lightning is close enough to taste. Tonight, she sets the nail down with the same calm she uses for prices. Habit beats weather more often than prayers do. The room tightens not in fear, but in focus. Mugs gather closer to elbows. Laughter lowers a half step. The careful older patron angles his chair away from the draft and watches the window like it's telling futures. The baker's apprentice wrings his cap into an acceptable puddle and apologizes to the floor. The floor-seasoned veteran doesn't mind. You make a slow circuit, tucking rags, righting cups, checking every candle that thinks it deserves sympathy. Light joke 2. It's always the short candles that faint first, tall ones are too proud to dim. You can't help glancing toward the mantle's cracked tile. The clay charm eye-hand swirl sits where you straightened it earlier, unfussed by weather and human plot alike. Mind the door, you whisper again, less hedge, more rhythm. Lisa, ferrying a tray, catches you and smiles without words. She has rags too tucked in her belt like a carpenter's apprentice. Historians still argue whether storm nights made houses like yours busier or emptier. Some say men ran to warmth and light. Others swear thunder cleared streets and coins vanished under pillows. You've lived both. Tonight, business doesn't thin so much as deepen fewer new faces, more regulars leaning into familiar tables, letting the rain preface their stories. One tells of a roof that peeled like an orange last winter. Another swears the north gate streams water through its hinges like a fountain. You nod and pour, performing the small miracle of making rooms feel larger when weather tries to make the world small. The storm changes key. Rain goes from angry to purposeful. Wind decides to explore the chimneys instead of the shutters, and the hearth sighs a smoke-smelling complaint. Greta crosses herself at the smoke's first inward lick. It's not piety so much as muscle memory, and flings the flue hook down a notch. The fire, chastened, sends its heat forward again. You open the tiny vent slit near the mantel with 2 fingers and a prayer to physics. The air shifts obediently. The room breathes like a bellows. You breathe with it. From the alley, a shout. Not angry, triumphant. You and Mina trade a look and crack the side door just enough to see. A youth in a rain-dark cloak is hauling a crate of onions out of a puddle like a fisherman displaying his catch. The crate bears the cooper's mark. He must have misjudged a handcart in the first flurry. The youth deposits the salvage under the dice den's overhang and receives a roar of approval worthy of a miracle. He takes an exaggerated bow and, because boys are boys in any century, slips on the slick plank and sits down hard. The cheer doubles. Light joke 3. Humility is the city's most abundant crop. You close the door gently, not wanting to let in the draft that has now decided to imitate a cathedral organ. The watch is still scarce Guildhall duties, as the madam said, and you notice how your shoulders square without being asked. The house will watch itself tonight. You refill the watered wine ewer and lay 2 spare rags on the trestle like reserve troops. Then it arrives, that smell you half dread, half cherish, the storm stirring the stables, up street, wet horses complaining to the cobbles, leather giving up its secrets to the rain. The scent spills through the shutter's seam, damp hay iron shoes, animal breath. It sifts into the rosemary underfoot, and the stew memory in the beams, turning the house's familiar perfume into something wilder. You lean closer to the shutter. The wood is cooler now, like a fever breaking. Bucket Greta calls, and you're already moving. The upstairs beam has a reputation for leaking exactly where the rope bed complains. You grab the old milk pail, race the stairs' mouse-voiced squeak, and plant the pail under the precise drip you could find in the dark. The second drop hits like a drum stroke. You shift the basin an inch, and the rhythm sweetens. Good, you tell the ceiling. Do your worst in there. The ceiling obliges with moderation. The pail does its job. Up here, the storm feels closer. The bubbled window pane frogs with water. The candle's flame stands taller in pride. You use the moment to check the nobleman's corner room, already tidied, cloak scent of lavender, now only a speculation. You straighten a coverlet corner that has developed ideas about diagonals, then turn the key in the lock for the satisfying click of a box closing on its secrets. Down the hall, you prod the sulky floorboard again. It behaves out of respect for rain. Back downstairs, the madam has unrolled a length of linen to sacrifice into narrower rags. She tears it with a decisive rip that sounds like quelling panic. Keep them handy, she says. Storms breed leaks and lies. You tuck 2 into your apron and 1 into your bodice like a scandal. Hob you ask quietly. She shakes her head. Saw him drift toward the bridge when the first drops fell. Men who owe everyone prefer to be washed clean by weather. It seldom works. Mainstream fact returns with Boots bridges are where the city's water and stories change direction at once. On storm nights, half the town's debris funnels under apples, rushes, lost shoes, sometimes luck if you're quick. Boys dangle lines for plunder. Women watch for useful wood. Someone always finds a hat that becomes a legend until morning proves it was a bucket. The careful older patron stands pays with coins that don't argue and says to no one, "I like rain." It reminds roofs they have a job. He gives the red thread on the door a respectful glance, then vanishes into the weather like a well-folded letter. Two sailors replace him, dripping and grinning, swearing the river is trying to climb the bank to visit. "Lock the beer," Greta mutters. "If the river starts paying, we'll talk." Historians still argue whether storm nights amplified superstition or sharpened pragmatism. You watch the room operate and think both. A nail on a sill, a rag at a seam, a knot on a latch, prayers with proof. You light one more candle, not because the room needs it, but because people do when rain insists on writing its name on every surface. By the hearth, Lise twists her wet kerchief and holds it toward the fire with a seriousness that would suit gold. You rescue it before it scorches, drape it on a chair's back, and she mouths, "Thank you," like you've saved a ship. The fire gives a satisfied snap. The scent of rabbit returns from memory, wrapping the room in a leftover lullaby. When the worst wind passes, storms are braggarts, more noise than stamina. The rain settles to a council. Drips learn patience. The gutter's hymn lowers to a hymn hum. You walk the perimeter like a night watch with rosemary on her boots, pressing each sill, wringing each rag, knitting the room back together seam by seam. You end at the front again, palm to shutter. Cool, steady. The lantern outside, shielded by the crooked eave, steadies its flame as well. You ease your hand away, and the wood releases you without complaint. Behind you, the house accepts the storm's new terms. Dice roll softer. Mugs trade clinks instead of thuds. In the corner, Mina balances a cup under a tiny leak like a magician catching coins. You press the pomander in your pocket until clove warmth rises, then let your shoulders remember their place farther from your ears. The red thread is damp but bright, like a rule that still holds. You look around and see what you always hope to see after weather flexes its muscle, a room that hasn't forgotten itself. Light joke 3 slides in late, polite and sleepy. You should paint "license to leak" on the sign and charge extra for the storm soundtrack. You don't say it out loud. The house has ears, but tonight you want it to drift toward calm, not laughter. The wind tests the latch one last time, like a guest deciding whether to leave. It decides yes. The rain keeps a gentler appointment. You set a fresh rag by the door in case either changes its mind, and take your place where you can see the street and the stairs in the same glance. The night will have more to say, but for now you've answered what it asked. First, keep the lights, keep the warmth, keep the room whole while weather rehearses its dramas outside. You listen for the hole in the road, the one every cart finds. A wheel hits it, splashes neatly and rolls on. You smile. Somewhere a horse shakes itself into a smaller storm and snorts the world back into order. Above the mantel, the cracked tile keeps its counsel. Behind it, the clay charm watches the door the way the door watches the night. And you, with damp rags and dry humor, stand where you always do between the street and the story until the storm decides to sleep. By the time the rain thins to threads, the house has taken on that washed look a city gets when the night has worked it over and decided to leave it standing. The air inside is still warm from the hearth, but sharper now, as if each breath has been rinsed and wrung out. You know this mood. It's the aftertaste of storms, a mixture of relief and readiness, the way a gambler feels after folding a bad hand and finding the next card in his palm anyway. The floorboards creak less when the air is this damp, their arguments softened. Somewhere upstairs, a slow drip into a pail keeps time with the wind's fading sighs. You make another circuit habit, not suspicion, checking that rags haven't soaked through, that the hearth still draws true, that the door latch hasn't decided to loosen in its own sleep. The red thread across it lies slack now, the rain's earlier sheen dried to a whisper of color in the lamplight. Mina is perched near the hearth, chin in hand, staring at the logs as though they might confess something. Her hair is loose damp from steam and catches the flicker like thin copper wire. Greta is in the corner with the sailors retying one's bootlace for him in a gesture that's as much command as kindness. The baker's apprentice has nodded off at his table, one hand still around the handle of an empty mug, as though it might refill itself if he's patient enough. Mainstream fact edges in with the quiet taverns and houses like yours rarely closed during storms in the city's busy quarters. Weather was a reason to stay put, not to shut down. If you had light warmth and something to drink, you became the city's second harbor, taking in whatever the streets washed your way. That's how fortunes were made, or at least kept from drowning. From outside comes the sound of the street rediscovering itself, the wet clop of a horse, taking measured steps, the faint ring of a cartwheel striking cobbles, the trickle of water negotiating gutters and drains. The air through the shutter's seam carries the mixed perfume of soaked wood, cooling stone, and the faintly metallic promise of a clearer dawn. You take the opportunity to fetch the small clay jar from behind the stacked bowls, a pot of rosemary salve you've had since last winter's coughs made the rounds. A dab on the wrists, another behind the ears, and the scent cuts through the lingering heaviness, sharp but kind. The madam passes by, notices, and tilts her head. For the room, she asks. You nod and she dips her fingers in too, dotting the mantel and the inside of the doorframe, with touches so light you barely see them. Keeps the air honest, she murmurs. In the dice den, the laughter has gone lazy like a cat stretching in slow motion. You can picture them through the wall, coins stacked in modest towers, hands gesturing in miniature dramas, the keeper's sharp eye missing nothing. A sneeze punctuates the hum. Then someone sings the first half of a sea shanty and abandons it after 2 lines. The rest of the table laughs without asking for the rest. Quirky tidbit drifts up from memory in some quarters. It's said that if you can hear dice through a wall on a night after rain, the next day will bring a stranger who changes something in your life. You've never seen it fail entirely, though the changes aren't always the kind you'd put in a song. At the front, you unlatch the upper half of the door just enough to look out. The street glistens under the lamplight, every puddle a mirror that doesn't quite agree with the sky. 2 cats are negotiating a dry spot under a cart, tails high and voices sharp. The boy who rescued the shutter earlier trots past, hood down now, hair plastered and grins still bright. He tips an imaginary hat in your direction without breaking stride. Behind you, the careful older patron hasn't returned, but his chair remains angled as he left it a small courtesy in a world where most men forget their footprint the moment they lift it. You straighten it anyway, sliding it into the shadow of the table so the room looks balanced again. The madam begins her end-of-night tally with the small box on her lap, lips moving as fingers dance over coins. You've learned not to interrupt. The rhythm of counting is her meditation. Greta brings her a cloth to wrap the box and gets a nod for her trouble. Mina begins stacking mugs at a speed that says she's decided on bed rather than gossip. You pour yourself a small cup of watered wine, just enough to take the edge off the damp, settling into your bones, and sit where you can see both door and hearth. The clay charm over the mantel is just a silhouette now, its details lost to shadow, but you feel its watch regardless. Historians like to say that storms made people tell the truth more than clear nights did. Something about the way the world outside thunders and rattles, loosens the tongue, makes secrets feel less permanent. You've seen it often enough to believe it. Tonight, though, the truths have been small ones. Preferences for ale over wine grudges, about drafts, confessions about leaky roofs. The bigger truths will wait for a night when thunder has more to say. When the last of the sailors leaves slapping Greta on the shoulder in thanks. The door closes on a street that is more silver than black now. Somewhere to the east, the clouds are pulling apart, letting a thin blade of moonlight touch the highest eaves. You stand for a moment, hands on the latch, feeling the quiet settle into the wood. The house smells of rosemary wet stone and the faint ghost of rabbit stew. It feels whole again. Outside, the storm has gone to find another street to argue with. Inside, you think you've done your job. Lights kept, warmth held, and the line between street and story guarded until morning. You take the last sip of wine, set the cup down, and let your fingers rest on the table's worn edge. The grain under your hand is smooth from years of such endings, and you trace it like a map you already know by heart. There's always another night, another storm, another watch to keep. But for now, you let the house sleep. Counting coins by candle's end is a ritual you could do blindfolded. You wouldn't, because that's how coins learn bad habits, but you could. You clear a patch of table near the hearth where the light is steady. Move the pomander from your pocket to the ledge and set out the small slate the madam lets you use for figures. The room is quieter now, storm-soft post-rush settled. Chairs stand closer to tables as if seeking comfort. Candles have lost some of their swagger and burn with the modesty of survivors. You loosen the knot in your pouch. Coins tumble out with the particular clatter of a day turning into rent, a few groats, a clutch of halfpennies, one blessed shilling that feels like it came from a better world and got homesick. You line them by size, then by face, then by their willingness to be counted. The shilling you check twice, not because you don't trust it, but because trust is what clips coin edges in this city literally. Mainstream fact-clipping and sweating coins, shaving or filing the edges for slivers of precious metal, or tumbling them to rub away value, was a punishable offense across medieval Europe. Some towns posted gallows by the mint to make the point, which did not stop inventive fingers from trying. You test the doubtful ones. The old way, tap metal to wood and listen. Honest coin sings, base metal coughs. The second method is thumb and nail along the edge, feeling for the telltale bite marks left by other people's teeth. Yes, people bite coins, and no, it doesn't make them cleaner. You catch one that feels wrong, too light for its brag. You put it in the little dish of shame the madam keeps for coins that need a conversation with the money changer in the morning. Historians still argue whether women like you became de facto experts in currency because survival demanded it, or because licensed houses moved so much small coin that patterns taught themselves. You suspect the answer is both. Your fingers know the market better than your ears do. The slate gets its rose. In today's take-out house cut, paid already, plus thread apples oil, owed the little debts that make a week go. You add lines quickly, the chalk catching on the slate's old grooves, yesterday's math, whispering under today's. You total the column, then do it again from the bottom up because numbers respect suspicion. Light joke 1, if the watch ever asked you to balance the city's ledgers, they'd finally know where the river money goes downhill and into pockets with holes. Lisa leans into the edge of your light, just her hair and hands visible as she dries mugs. She whispers totals from the front: 2 sailors, 1 baker, 3 dice refugees, the careful older man who always pays exact, and the noble who paid for silence and left it behind unbroken. You add, subtract, set aside. Greta passes with the stew pot, tapping your elbow with its warm side in benediction, then stacks bowls as softly as plates can be stacked when wood has opinions. Quirky tidbit wanders in with the memory of the market. Some money changers keep a touch book, a small codex of rubbed impressions, showing marks of different mints and reigns so they can spot fakes at a glance. You don't have a book, but you've built a memory of monarch faces and mint quirks. This town has coins from so many roads. Your palm is a crossroads. The shilling gets another approving tap. The halfpennies shuffle like shy children and arrange themselves into usefulness. You pause and breathe your rosemary salve, then turn to the small roll of IOUs written on scraps and twine. One is for the tinker who swore to fix the kettle as if it were the queen's tiara. Another is the cloth man's thread already paid with a wink and the last copper shaved by a smile. A third fatter is the charcoal man's tally. Winter taught you never to be casual with heat. You tick off what can be settled in the morning and what must ask for another week of patience. The house lives on a seesaw coin, one side mercy on the other. When the seesaw's level, you sleep better. Mainstream facts cousin arrives wearing Ink City markets, often licensed official weighers and assayers. Disputes over short measure or false coin went before guild wardens who made decisions with a mix of law and the raised eyebrow of a man whose brother-in-law owns half the stalls. That's why the madam keeps her ledgers squared. No one argues with neat numbers under a clean margin. Historians still argue whether such accounting protected women's houses or simply handed inspectors a map. You've watched both outcomes march through your door. You pull the house's small lockbox closer, count out the madam's due for repairs and fees, candles, oil, laundry, soap, the quiet envelope that buys the watch's attention when you need it, and absence when you don't. You add a single extra halfpenny to the lampline, remembering how the storm's smoke tried to retell the evening in its own words. Then you fold a small square for yourself, bread apples a little for thread, a promise to the tinker. What's left you knot into the pouch and tuck back where pickpockets' hopes go to die. Greta flops onto the bench opposite like a cat deciding to be a sack. How's the river, she asks, meaning coin. Wet, you say, meaning enough to float you, not enough to swim laps. She snorts approval. The dice keeper says the captain will come late. He wants me to save him a song. Save him a towel, you advise. Light joke 2 tiptoes out. The captain pays in rations of swagger. Wallets hate swagger diets. You scrape the slate with the rag, leaving only today's final digits and the smugness of a column that behaves. You blow out the nearest candle to save it for tomorrow and coax the others lower with a careful trim of their wicks, keeping the room warm without wasting the night away. The little shame coin dish you set near the ledger. The madam will fuss it in the morning, and fussing is the secret heart of her affection. The priest's folded parchment on the mantel watches you refusing to open it. Lisa asks, will we read it when it pays rent, you say. She grins, puts the last mug on its shelf, and yawns, the kind of yawn that's an argument against staying upright. The storm bucket upstairs ticks its metronome. The dice den sags to embers of sound. Historians still argue whether women in houses like this saved enough to leave, or whether the city always found a way to claw money back. Finds friends' needs winter. You've seen both stories end with a hand on a door, leaving or returning. Your own plan is stitched small into everything you do. One more strip of linen for the chest. One more coin beyond the week's hunger. One more skill, learn the bent needle's curve. The lamp's mood, the captain's tells when he lies. It's not a grand plan, But grand plans don't climb stairs and set rags under leaks. Yours do. You sweep the coins into their places, slate-wiped table rubbed with the heel of your palm, until the grain shines like a promise wrung thin and true. The house has that end-of-day hush that says beds are thinking about welcoming backs. You look at the red thread on the door and the nail on the sill and the clay charms profile and think not for the first time that rooms remember who watched them. You tuck the last halfpenny into the community jar for soap someone always forgets, everyone always uses, and cap the ink. Light joke 3, if soap had a guild, it would send you a patron saint and a medal. Lise giggles on her way to the stairs. The madam closes her box with a click that lets the whole room exhale. Up, she says, not sharp, just final. You gather your pouch, your pomander, and the day's quiet pride. The numbers behaved. The lamps behaved. The house behaved. Your knees, well, your knees did their best. The madam's final words before bed are never the same, but they always rhyme with tomorrow. She stands at the base of the stairs like a secular saint of threshold's ledger under one arm, keys like jangling punctuation, gray hair braided so tight, even dreams won't tug it loose. The storm's draft has dwindled to a polite breath. The lantern by the door burns small and straight. She looks at each of you in turn, Mina rubbing her wrists, Greta rolling her lace like a sailor coils rope, Lise blinking slow as a cat, and nods at what she sees, enough, enough, enough. 3 things she says, which can mean 2 or 5. First, shutter latches stay tied. Wind likes to argue when no one's listening. Don't be generous with weather. You and Mina trade a small salute with the red thread as if it were a flag. Second, dice men have lost their appetite for miracles tonight. If any stagger in at second bell asking for credit, remind them the church sells hope cheaper. Greta snorts. And third, the madam adds, Hobcutter is to be a ghost. If he knocks, the house is deaf. If he begs, the house is blind. If he swears he's a king, the house bows to the empty air. Her smile is thin and kind, which is how steel looks when it's learned manners. Mainstream fact slides into her cadence. Licensed houses often had printed or chalked house rules, no credit, no weapons, no fighting hours, fixed to bells and curfew. In some towns, a city beadle would initial those rules to make them binding. In others, the madam's reputation inked them better than any seal. Historians still argue whether such rules protected women or mainly protected prophets. In your hall, they do both, and protection is a profit you can spend on sleep. Keys change hands, one for the kitchen chest, one for the lamp oil, one for the back gate that squeals unless you talk to it first. She hands you the kitchen key tonight, a sign she trusts your dawn to start before hers if it must. Bread, first thing she says. And check the bucket upstairs. If it's sulking, cheer it. You nod. You have jokes for buckets. Most buckets appreciate them. She softens then the way she does when the day is folded and the spine has been pressed flat. Eat when you wake, she says, eyes on Lisa. Even if it's only onion and the heel of last night. Bodies that wait to be kind to themselves forget how. She taps Greta's wrist where the lace has already marked the skin. Loosen your triumph, she murmurs, and Greta, startled into gentleness, smiles and does. Quirky tidbit bubbles up in her counsel as it often does. If the moon's thin and sharp, hang your apron by the window and it will cut new pockets into it, she says with a straight face, then winks. Lisa gasps, delighted. Mina snorts, unconvinced. You grin and file it under magic you make when you need a reason to mend. She turns to the mantel as a priest might to an altar, picks up the folded parish parchment, and without opening it, tucks it under the ledger. We will not be priest-led in our dreams, she says not unkindly. Tomorrow, if it rains on the baker's oven, we'll read the father's poetry for a laugh. The room breathes easier. Even paper has a scent, and this one smelled like obligation. Light joke, one parchment is heavier at night because it tries to sleep on your chest. Historians still argue whether houses like ours were more family or factory, she says, then surprising you with a phrase you've heard from visitors who like to lecture. I don't argue. We are a table. Some nights there is stew, and some nights there is only the spoon, but we sit, and that is what keeps the roof from choosing the river. You feel the image find a chair in you and sit down. The stew left its ghost on the walls. The spoon gleams clean on the hook. The table holds marks from 100 little lives that learn to fit beside one another without splinters. She makes the rounds with a palm flat to shoulders, not a pat, not a push, a placement. You hear, you hear, you hear. When she reaches you, her hand lingers a moment longer. You were steady, she says, which is praise enough to bank for a lean week. The noble quiet, you answer. Good. The storm taught the house to sing. Good. Hob learned nothing. She sighs a small weather of her own. That is also good. Tomorrow he may learn something he didn't plan to learn. You think of the bridge, the boys fishing for hats, the way luck comes up dripping and calls itself clever. She runs through bell times. First bell for the bakers. You'll fetch bread if the street behaves. Second for market carts. Third for the beetle who even on dry days can't resist condemning puddles with the righteous squint of a man who's never washed his own floor. Curfew times have been flexed lately for guild speeches. The watch will remember their halberds again when the speeches stop. If the captain comes, the madam will sell him a song and a towel. If the priest comes, she'll sell him humility and keep the coin. Light joke too. Humility has a price. Ask anyone who owns a velvet cloak. Upstairs creaks remind all of you that straw and rope need sleep as much as backs do. The bucket pings a final drip. Even leaks get tired. The madam blows out a lamp and shadows step forward like polite guests in evening shoes. Last thing she says, and it is the thing she says most nights in one form or another. If fear comes, send it to me. If a thought won't sleep, give it a chore count, knots in the beam. Name saints in that cracked plaster. Plan a ribbon for a feast that isn't on the calendar yet. Do not let your mind be the only loud room. You nod. You've learned to give thoughts brooms. Mainstream fact drops a small anchor. City curfews rang on tower bells, and doors were expected to be barred. Licensed houses could petition for later hours supervised attendance, but the watch preferred quiet numbers after midnight. Historians still argue whether curfew was about crime or control. You've seen both noise as trouble's carriage, and power likes to know when the streets are empty enough to hear its own boots. Keys settle into the night drawer. The red thread gets one last check. The nail on the sill holds its silent theology. Go up, the madam whispers, and the stairs accept you. Lisa pads ahead on cat feet. Mina carries the lamp with a reverence she wouldn't waste on a sermon. Greta volunteers the kind of yawn that belongs in guild records. You look back once and see the madam alone at the base of the steps, face lit from below by a candle that makes her look like every ancestor you've ever imagined, tired, proud, stubborn about roofs. She nods toward the landing. You climb. Light joke 3, if the stairs had knees, they'd file a grievance after your shift. You promise the boards an extra rub with rosemary tomorrow, and the boards in their way believe you. The loft greets you with the particular quiet that only rooms learn. People call it silence, but it's really the song a place hums when it's been looked after. The bucket's drip has slowed to occasional punctuation. The spider in the corner has rewoven her net where the earlier draft scuffed it. You admire her union rules: break, repair, catch, repeat. Your straw mattress remembers your shape the way a well-worn shoe remembers a road. You flatten a stubborn hill with the side of your fist, and it sighs into compliance. You ease the threadbare blanket over your knees, the wool catching at your skin like a cat choosing to stay. The pewter pin gives up its day and rests in the cracked bowl by your pallet. Your hair loosens with a miniature thunderclap of its own. From below comes that last set of house noises. A chair pushed home a latch persuaded the madam's steps, counting the surviving candles. Your chest unclenches when you hear the ledger drawer click. That sounds a lullaby in this place. Mainstream fact slips in as you settle. Most working people slept on straw-stuffed pallets or rope beds, with a straw tick linen for under and wool for over. Feather beds were luxuries, though taverns might claim them to raise rates. Ropes need tightening sleep tight, they say, and straw needs freshening with herbs, so dreams smell like something other than old work. You pull the blanket to your chin and catch the ghost of rosemary and parsley the kitchen shed earlier. The courtyard jars are good for more than stew. The red thread from the latch below feels present even up here, as if a tug on it would tug at your heartbeat. The nail on the sill sits heavy in memory. You like that a piece of the world was asked to do a job and did it. The clay charm behind the cracked tile downstairs keeps its watch. You imagine its stamped eye blinking once satisfied, quirky tidbit pads into the dark. Some folks swear that if you put iron under your pillow, nightmares can't find your head. You tried it once with a spoon and woke with a bruise that taught you a different charm, counting breaths until the room's breath and yours agree. Lise curls into her spot with the practiced stealth of someone who doesn't want to wake the straw. "Good night," she whispers, voice already losing its edges. "Good night," you answer, and decide not to tell her that the moon has indeed cut pockets into your apron, simply by you choosing to put a needle there tomorrow. Let magic earn its rest. You replay the day in miniature, not to worry it, but to sort it, the merchant's gray eyes softening after the basin's water shocked road dust into honesty. The noble's lavender cloak hanging like a borrowed story in the corner room. The priest's parchment folded like a scold and demoted to a shelf. The brawl's froth washing away down the lane. The storm turning the door into a drum you kept in time. The dice den's roar, the watch's absence, Hobbs' brief shadow, all filed, all made small enough to store. Historians still argue whether memory serves women like you or burdens you does, remembering every coin and face and leak make you safer. Or does it rob you of sleep with its restless accounting? You've learned to curate, keep the numbers, keep the tells. Let the insults go limp and slide away. The day's best jokes you keep on a high shelf for mornings, license to leak, ferret Captain River pays its debts. So dawn has something to smile at. Your knees report in, your shoulders report in. Even your fingers, needle bent and broom polished, mutter their minutes. You lay a palm on each complaint, as if stamping a document approved for rest. The roof, lately argumentative in weather, lies quiet in its honesty. The floorboard that sulks decides to be a bridge instead of a trap. The hole every cart finds does not exist up here. The river, busy with other streets, leaves your dream alone. Light joke one, barely a breath. If the bed had a guild, it would fine you for overuse and underfluff. You smile in the dark, where only the spider can see. Wind has stopped trying arguments and gone to bother someone else's shutters. The city reduces to essentials: a distant dog debating philosophy with himself, a cartwheel admitting defeat to a puddle, a far bell that might be a monk and might be the imagination of a tired board. You find your breath joining the house's four in long out until your body forgets it exists, except to warm the patch you occupy. Before sleep pulls you, make your small promises to tomorrow the way a mariner knots lines, check the bucket. See the tinker stretch the rope bed with a joke and a wedge. Teach Lee's the river to lake stitch again, buy bread early before the beadle condemns the street for being wet in public. If hobnocks be deaf, if the captain sings, sell him a towel. If the priest returns, sell him laughter and keep your coin. If the noble's pouch was a whisper of politics, keep it unspoken. If the dice den keeps its volume, turn yours down. If the sky keeps its water layout, rags like welcome mats for leaks. Light joke 2, remind Greta that wine doesn't count as washing unless the Lord himself signs the jug. She will, as always, countersign. Sleep slides closer, a cat you don't call, but who knows your lap is free. You try on one last thought, the kind you can let go without it boomeranging back. Rooms are kept by hands. The day was held by yours and hers and theirs, and by a red thread and an iron nail and a clay eye that owes you nothing but offered company. That is in your small, stubborn way, the shape of a life. Your last awareness is of the faint clove warmth in your palm, where the pomander has been hiding, and the soft hiss of straw settling into the idea of morning. Light joke 3 doesn't land. It yawns and becomes breathing. Now the blanket remembers how to be ashore and you drift. Let the room fall softer, now edges rounded lamplight dim as a thought you don't need to finish. The bench, the shutter, the worn bowl with its faithful pin, they all step back a pace, leaving space for your ribs to rise and fall without instruction. The house's breath is long and slow. Yours matches it easily, like two boats finding the same tide. If a floorboard creaks, it's only a friendly animal shifting in its sleep. Nothing to do, nothing to fix, nothing to guard. You can set the day on the table and walk away from it. The coins stay where you left them. Numbers do not run when eyes are closed. Outside, the street has decided to be a lullaby, water quiet in the gutter. A single late cart rolling carefully, the horse careful too. Even the dice next door have settled into the small clatter dreams make when they forget to be loud. The red thread on the latch holds its color in the dark. The iron nail is just iron again, cool and certain. The little clay charm behind the cracked tile keeps its gaze without asking you to keep yours. Breathe in rosemary and warm wood. Breathe out the last of the storm, the last sharp edge of voices, the last sums you tried twice. Shoulders let go, jaw lets go. Hands that counted, wiped, mended, poured, now rest open palms loose as leaves. You can let the roof keep itself the watch, other doors. The priest read his own parchment, the river find its own arguments with the bridge. There is only a small bed that knows your shape, and a blanket willing to be a shoreline. Let sleep be weather that chooses you gently, long kind rain on a garden you forgot you were tending. If a thought returns, give it a task so simple it yawns. Count the knots, name the herbs, follow one candle's wick down into a pool of smooth, unbroken dark. And when the dark welcomes you, go without looking back. End of script. Sweet dreams.